You're listening to DecayMag 100th episode podcast.
You're listening to DecayMag podcast season 8 episode 13, also known as our 100th episode. My name is Ken R2's DecayMag founder. I would like to take the time to extend much thank you to the DecayMag team, both newcomers, new content contributors to our online presence, as well as for those who have been with us since the beginning and the majority of DecayMag over the past 4 years. Beginning with Enid Artuz, my wife, also Chief Financial Officer here at DecayMag. Stacy Cox, Staff Correspondent here at DecayMag, also podcast co-host, which unfortunately, due to conflicts of schedule, she couldn't join us for this milestone podcast. Samantha Kolsnick, content contributor. She is also a filmmaker and co-founder of the Women in Horror Film Festival. Next, David Teixeira, content contributor, also a filmmaker. And by the way, we're going to be reviewing his latest film, Ouroboros, in this podcast. And also Ali Vela, content contributor. For the newcomers of the team, Stephen Gillespie, content contributor from Possessed Radio. Then we have Rebecca Colodis, content contributor. Also Michelle Merce, author, horror author. And rounding out the newcomers, the new content contributors to the team, Rowan Richards. Thank you so much, DecayMag team. Without your contributions and your help, and I do understand the 9 to 5 grind, the personal things that come into life, but thank you guys for setting time aside to do the assignments, whether it be an interview session, a podcast recording, or a film review. Your assistance in making DecayMag as grand as it is, as influential to the horror community as it is, I greatly appreciate and I'm humbled for your support. Also, would like to extend a thank you to the folks over at October Coast, Clint Morris, as well as Justin Cook PR. Without the help of these two companies, prestigious companies, we wouldn't be where we're at right now either. Definitely extend thank you for everything, all the leads and the reviews and the talent that you have sent our way to review and to fill our interview slots here on our podcast. This podcast is chock full of information, and not only that, we have not one but two special guest co-hosts who will also be featured in our exclusive interview segment. Beginning with our special guest co-host is Jennifer Nangle, aka Queen Malvolia. Thank you so much for joining me today in this exclusive 100th episode. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And yeah, I can't believe time has gone so fast for us. Our 100th episode over the course of 4 years. It's amazing.
That is definitely something to be proud of.
Oh, absolutely. And kicking it off, we have so many things to cover. We have 3 films, short films that we're going to be reviewing together. And after the segment, we're going to have an exclusive interview with you on your career in horror and your acting career and everything about you.
Woo!
Concluding our exclusive interview with Jennifer Nangle, we have an exclusive interview with Vanessa, Ioana, Wright, co-founder of the Women in Horror Film Festival, our very first film fest that we have attended this year, 2018, a grand platform showcasing the women's movement in horror cinema. Afterwards, we have special guest co-host Dan Lee from Dano of the Dead blog. He will serve as special guest co-host covering the horror news and also trailer first impressions. We'll also be picking his brain in an exclusive interview.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm happy to talk, especially when it comes to something the Soska sisters are working on. That's I'm actually a little bit of a fanboy, especially after meeting them last year at Women in Horror.
Without further ado, let's begin our program, and thank you once again for listening to DK Mag Podcast Season 8, Episode 13, aka our 100th episode. You could find us on all social media platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, at DK Mag. Cannot stress it enough. We are not DK Magazine, DK the letter D or K. We are DK Mag.
Segment 1. Short Film Reviews, Ouroboros. Directed by David Teixeira.
We just heard the trailer for Ouroboros, the latest short film from DecayMag's content contributor David Teixeira, and kicking it off with the technical aspects of the film Ouroboros. The cinematography was quite phenomenal. I've seen David's career really advanced since his first short film. I don't know if you have seen it, Jennifer. It is titled Girls' Night, and he followed that up with Girls' Night 2. And with this cinematography, we see something entirely different, and everything is shot exterior, which poses its own problems in itself, but he did quite well with the visual narrative. What's your opinion for that aspect with the cinematography for this short film?
It was a really interesting location. Well, multiple locations that they chose. It was in an apartment, and it was like comfy, and it was home. And then, she was transitioned into kind of what felt like another land or another time period or whatever. So I feel like it really worked in that film.
For the originality and for something redefining, especially in horror, where everything seems to be regurgitated, I think that David really touched on something unique here, a nightmarish creature. And I joked with him, one segment we see this witch do a crab walk. It freaks me out to see that. So with the originality aspect, what do you think of this film?
She was definitely really creepy, really eerie. And for a little while too, I was like, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't really figure it out. But he did tie everything and twist everything really well at the end, which I thought was great.
And the performances. I think the actress here did a phenomenal job doing both roles. I think as the sinister creature, she did exceptionally much better than the victim. The victim, in my opinion, she needed to be a little bit more frightened in a way. But as that creature, the witch, that was outstanding.
Well, being an actor myself, I'm sure she had a really hard time. I'm just assuming she probably didn't have anybody to work off of while they were filming it.
Right.
So when you don't have a visual in front of you and you don't have the exact visual that was already done prior for you to work off of, or vice versa, that can be really hard. So, I mean, kudos to her. I think she did as best she could with what was going on and what they had.
So that's a good point. And that's an area, especially for voiceover work. I had the impression that voiceover work, you had the actors in the same room, and that's not the case. They have to create an imaginary situation in their mind and try to put that's why when you play video games, they don't sound as good as, let's say, an animated film.
Yeah, exactly. You have to, I mean, that's also with like green screen and CG. You really have to create that visual in your mind, because if you're not in that element, it's really hard to be really realistic. So the people that do it and do it well are really good actors, really good. Like we're in a time period now where it's really difficult to really keep up with all of that stuff. So you really have to think outside the box, big time. For
the plot, once again, the plot that David presents is really, I would like to see this extended a little bit more. And that's the problem with short films, any short film, is that you have to have plot gaps, because there's only so much that you can contain in a 9-minute film, 10-minute film, and there's always going to have these elements that the audience is going to ask, who's this witch? Why is she tormenting this girl? That goes across the board, in my opinion.
True, but it also leaves it up to the audience, where the audience can leave and create that for themselves.
Absolutely true. Right. It's a flip side, and that's always good to have different opinions towards films. Practical effects, I see there is a really high-end makeup effects on the witch. There is no special effects, which is great. I'm always advocate for the makeup design, and this creature really has the teeth, the outfit, everything is well put together.
I agree.
And for the scare factor, it depends. For horror connoisseurs such as yourself and I, it may not be as scary, but for the average viewer, the casual viewer, I think this film would really portray something frightening, something nightmarish.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I felt like the film was a little bit more suspenseful, but again, like you said, like I watch horror like it is going out of style. So for it to be scary, I mean, but she was pretty terrifying. Like if I were to wake up in the middle of the night and she was there, yeah, I wouldn't like that at all.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. And once again, David, you fucking creeped me out with that crab walk. When I saw she was bending backwards, I was like, no, don't do it. Hey, I could watch dismemberments, I could watch everything, but for some strange reason, crab walks freak me out. I don't know.
All right, well, now that the whole world knows that, watch out.
Exactly. Overall, what is your opinion on the viewing experience for this film?
I thought it was really great. I give it 2 thumbs up. I really enjoyed it. I would love for him to put it into a film festival and, see where it goes, see where it takes him.
I believe that's the next step for David Teixeira, adding this to the slate of upcoming film festivals. I believe 2019. I'm unsure. The year is ending. I'm not sure how the film festivals are running now. But yeah, I think this would catch up with some amazing awards. And now we're going to shift from something psychological to our next, you're laughing already, to our next film titled High Tea.
High Tea. Directed by Meneok.
this short film is titled High Tea and is directed by Meneok. The film is about a young woman who awakens in a mysterious shack, bound at the wrists and ankles, with no recollection of how she got there. Her captor gives her 3 chances to escape with her life. That is, of course, as long as she can roll the perfect joint according to his strict criteria. Oh, wow. Oh.
Wow, I was
amazing.
right.
Okay. All right. Let's kick it off with originality and how redefining. How did you think this film fits into that criteria?
Well, I was very confused because going into it, I think high tea, I think of, being in England and having high tea, which he did introduce. But I wasn't expecting the whole pot comedy, pothead jokes. I don't really understand that humor too much. But as far as what he did, as far as the girl being kidnapped, the guy who kidnapped her, his interesting, look and feel to him, and then just the things that they did with one another was definitely very original.
Right. Oh. When I watch a short film, I'm always looking for a social commentary or some type of message. And I think the message for this film is just pure comedy. I would say that's original in a sense of what the director's trying to do. Something redefining, I would need more substance. I like substance in my horror films.
Yeah.
Something with a message. And as you had noted, I see the title, I'm thinking something else, and weed pops up. Okay, all right. Hey, that's the level of creativity for horror. We have such a wide range of interpretation.
Absolutely.
Cinematography. What did you think about that camera works and the camera angles the director used in this film?
I think it worked for the film. There were moments where it was really up close. There were a lot of, specials on props and, things that they were using. I felt like you were just really there. You were there and you were there with them, experiencing this whole situation.
And the challenge here was the close enclosure, which limits the director's ability to really convey different angles. If he would have opted for a larger room, he would have had better angles, overhead angle, a really close-up movement of the camera, something that would heighten suspense. I think he used one camera, which was just flipped back and forth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think with the budget that they were working on, I think that they were just trying to do the best they could with what they had. And so I see what your point is, but at the same time, I mean, it just felt really like low or no budget, which I always commend because that's what I always work off of. And so, with what they had, I think they just worked it. They definitely worked with what they could do.
That is always the issue when short films are made, especially in the independent scene. It's always the case of how can you do the proper composition at a low cost.
Exactly. Yeah. And my whole feel on that too is if you do get a chunk of money, I say make a feature. Don't put it into a short film. Because, your short film's only going to go so far and it's only going to go so many places. Whereas if you do have some money, put that into locations for a feature or get one location for a feature that you can just do the whole feature in or whatever. So
Right. And I would suggest to buy the camera. And these days, by buying the camera, I mean, if you don't have the money to buy Red, get 2 mobile devices, the latest mobile devices. They have great cameras on them. You could make good films on them.
Yeah, I don't hear of anybody renting cameras anymore. I mean, I know I have a camera. I know my crew, we got a camera. Like, we all own our stuff. So I think that we're definitely transitioning into that for sure.
Right. For the performances, what is your opinion on the performances here with the captor and the hostage here in this situation?
The captor was interesting. He kind of gave me like a Darth Vader type feel. Like, his voice was masked, or it was like some sort of creature. Like, he kind of felt futuristic, which felt a little bit out of place. But the hostage as well. I mean, again, it was horror comedy, so and the subject was quite comical. So I think they did the best that they could. Right.
Yeah. Once again, for me, the performance for the captor, I don't know. It just felt she needed more emphasis of being scared. There was a lack of that fear. Some crying, some tearing, something shivering, something that would manifest with the audience that she's frightened. But at the same time, I'm looking at the film for the second time and I'm saying, okay, it's a comedy. So if she's portraying too much emotion, will that digress from the comedy aspect?
I think if she were to, if they did go that route and do the fear and the crying, it would have to be over the top. I think it would have to be very, very dramatic to make it fit with what this film is. And so I guess that was kind of like a choice that they decided not to go with. But
it's difficult conveying something on the independent scale for horror and comedy, because you got to blend the best of both worlds. I have to applaud the filmmakers who do such a thing.
Yeah, it's honestly not my favorite genre at all. Like, as far as within the horror realm, I don't really like it at all, and that's probably, I mean, I hate to bring this up, but that was like my one thing with the new Halloween, the comedy that was in it. It just totally took me out of it. And with this, I felt it, again, it was like more suspenseful comedy rather than horror comedy, if that makes sense.
Right. The scare factor, for me, there was no scare factor whatsoever.
Yeah.
The comedy element here is with the weed, the pot. And watching this film, I said to myself, hey, if they made this film in the Bronx, the girl would have escaped on her first roll. Hey, that's it. End of story in 5 minutes.
Truth. Here in LA, it's legal now. We all can roll it really quickly.
Oh, wow. I think the challenge here, instead of rolling a joint, I don't know who smokes joints. Over here in the Bronx, it's blunts. I think that would have been a better challenge, because you have to roll it a certain way long and hey. But I've said to myself, who smokes joints?
I think this was in Canada. Maybe the Canadians do it different. You never know.
Yeah, perhaps. Practical effects, there was no practical effects, special effects. So we might as well just jump into the viewing experience. From your point of view, what did you think about the film overall?
Again, it wasn't my favorite. I don't really like comedy horror. I definitely thought it was an interesting topic. I think people that like that kind of humor and they like that kind of subject would enjoy it. But for me, it was just not my style.
Yes, I would have to agree. There's very few horror comedies that I would say are at the top of my list, and to reach that list is very hard to do. The comedic element for me has to be sarcasm, because I like sarcastic comedy. I joke with my wife, What We Do in Shadows is one horror comedy that has a lot of sarcasm. She just detests the movie. I love the film.
I was kind of wishy-washy on it as well. Yeah.
It kind of grows on you.
It's a very creative, out-of-the-box film for sure. I will agree with that. Yes, I just felt like it goes a little too long, but
Right. Yeah, it does go. That should have been good as a short film. My opinion with high tea, I would rather see a slasher than a slasher comedy.
agreed.
A Doll Distorted. Directed by Niall Shukla.
A Doll Distorted, directed by Niall Shukla. The plot revolves around Jane suffering from hapiophobia, the pathological fear of touch. Tormented by years of loneliness and isolation, she orders a synthetic love doll online to nightmarish consequences. Okay, wow. This film,
Wow is right.
right? This film generates wow in a different context as opposed to high tea. And the cinematography, phenomenal job.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
What was your opinion on that? That blew me away.
About the cinematography, I thought it was beautiful. I think they did such a gorgeous job. The lighting, the visuals that they did told so much in such like a quick, type of shot. You got so much out of these constant visuals, being put into your, psyche type thing. It was kind of reminding me of like when you watch, people in like therapy offices, and they're like, what does this look like to you? What does this shape look like to you? And they analyze it. Like I know that watching this film, what I got from it would be completely different than what you got from it. Absolutely. But I think lighting, I just thought everything visually was on point. Loved
Yes. Amazing. And looking at the production, the director, not only did he direct the film, but he also did the lighting, the cinematography. Usually when someone does wear all the hats in a production, I'm thinking, okay, it's going to degrade the film because they just want to do everything themselves. But in this case, everything came together so seamlessly and surreal, abstract. No wonder this film is killing it on the film festival circuit, winning awards left and right.
It definitely was an interesting. It was an experience. I will say that. I was in it from like the second it started playing, and then he kind of lost me. Just because those same visuals were being portrayed over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I got a little lost there. But then towards the end, when he was trying to sum up everything, like when she steps on the glass, I mean, like a lot of those things were really bringing me back into it. And I love the fact too that he didn't always use sound. Like there was a lot of moments where there was complete silence. And as a person that's alone and secluded and not wanting to be around people or you will have that. And so you were there experiencing it with her for sure. Right.
And the director really grasps the psychological element of someone in this. The Room, in my opinion, played the part a double meaning that she was isolated in her mind instead of being in the actual literal room that she was in.
Yeah, I see that as well.
In terms of an originality and redefining, I think this film really knocks it out the park. I haven't seen anything coming close to this concept, but I see a resurgence of psychology involved in horror, whether it be fear of isolation, fear of whatever the case may be. that seems to be the new theme now.
Yeah. Well, our brains can play lots of tricks on us and put us in crazy scenarios and make us overthink things. So I think everybody can relate to that for sure.
Right. And when that plays into the supernatural, that even heightens things, because we could say, was this person thinking of ghosts, or was it just a fragment of her imagination? Was she off her meds, or is the place really haunted? So it has the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole like missing person sign too. I mean, that popped up, and then you're like, wait, what is that? Wait, no, because he's fake. Wait, is he not fake? Oh, what is all this stuff coming from the? I mean, there's so much. He said so much in just such a quick shot, you know. So that to me is really killer storytelling. Very,
very amazing performances. Absolute wonderful performances here by the actress. Wow, no words. Anything to add on that? I was blown away.
No, she was great. She was in it. She was dedicated. She went there. Definitely went there. So it was very realistic, true to life.
This is the example that I was mentioning for the first two films, is emotional content. This is what I look for in a horror film, when the actress really goes all out and portrays someone, in this case, someone really distraught on her mind, struggling in her mind, and ultimately, not to give away the ending, but that surprise ending, I wasn't expecting that from that type of character. So she was the antagonist and the protagonist.
Yeah. She was fighting her fight the whole time.
An incredible fight that is. What is your opinion on the plots?
Well, I feel like a lot of people can relate to it on an everyday thing, you know, like when because they kind of played upon the whole thing of her not being able to be with somebody that she wants to be with, or she's rejected by that person, or she couldn't be with that person because she couldn't, you know, physically touch them or whatever. And I feel like a lot of people can feel that because we get rejected every day. We you know, there are breakups, there are relationships that are always on roller coasters. I mean, you know, people come in and out of your life, and so I feel like they can connect with that with the plot and stuff like that very easily. I feel like everybody can get something out of this. And again, it kind of goes back to what you get from the film is going to be totally different than what I get from the film.
That is so true. And before we go over this segment, overall, the viewing experience, in my opinion, I think this is a phenomenal film. I think it deserves to be a full feature. There's, of course, there's some gaps in the plot, especially with the missing person and how that ties into the doll. Also, I believe her husband is involved because of the photograph that was shown. So there's little bits of holes in the plot. A full feature film, if he were to do it the same way, not too surreal, may sway the average viewer, but just keep the same lighting and cinematography, I think it would do great as a film.
There was a film years ago that Ryan Gosling was in. I forget the title of it, but it did touch upon, you know, like this same subject, and him having a love doll as a companion, and the town really embracing it, and yeah, it's a crazy, it's a comedy. It's not a horror. So I think if you were to bring it more horror elements, I think it would definitely be a totally different feel film. And it would be really interesting.
That's interesting. Wow. Well, synthetic love dolls are a thing. I did some research. They're kind of expensive. Yes, they are. But wow. Oh, yeah. I can't believe that's where we're going to right now. But mind you, with social media, you would think people are more connected. I think people are more apart now that we have the technology now, which is sad.
Yeah, no, I work with the public. I work, you know, I I work at a salon, so I have to interact with humans every day. And the way that people treat me now and talk to me and stuff like that, it's such a downer. Like, nobody will look at you. They're always in their phones. I see tops of heads more than I see, faces and having conversations. Like, nobody wants to talk to you anymore. They always want to just do like text or whatever. So it is kind of a scary place that we're going into.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's so true. And that concludes our first segment of short film reviews, a quick recap. And now is our second segment, which will be an exclusive interview with you.
Yay!
Segment 2 exclusive interview. Jennifer Nangle, Queen Malvolia.
Scared. I don't bite.
Too hard. I want to show you something. It's bound to frighten you to death. And you know how much I prefer the dead over the living. Come and be my first.
Once again, before we start our exclusive interview, thank you for your time joining me for this first segment and joining me for this 100th podcast episode of DK Mag.
Thank you for having me.
And the first question, I always like to provide an opportunity for the interviewee to provide an origin story. We all have one, especially superheroes. What is your origin story? Your humble beginnings leading up to the performing arts, and of course, your alter ego, Queen Malvolia.
Malvolia, yes. Well, I grew up in a small town just north of Boston. I'm an East Coaster. I'm an only child. I grew up in a small town called Danvers, which is right next to Salem. So I grew up a lot with a lot of history, Salem witches, a lot of creepy things. I grew up in a haunted house. So horror has always been a part of my life. My dad is a huge horror buff. And so he introduced me to Alfred Hitchcock at a very young age. And it was always common for us to talk about vampires and horror monsters and all that kind of stuff when we had like holiday dinners and stuff like that with family. I started acting when I was 10. I went and saw a musical of The Sound of Music that friends were a part of, and they were younger than me, and they were walking around the stage and they were singing and dancing, and I was just so enthralled and fascinated by it that I basically, after the show, told my mom, I was like, this is what I want to do. And so she, bless her heart, because my uncle was an actor in New York for years, off Broadway and all that kind of stuff, and he had a hard journey, and so she didn't want me to do that, but I was determined, and so I auditioned for everything I could possible. It was always musical theater. And then when I graduated high school, I was like, well, I'm going to move to New York City. I want to be on Broadway. That's what I want to do. And she was like, over my dead body. So
Really?
My parents made me go to college. And I said, if I have to go to college, I want to go for theater. And so we kind of found that medium. And I graduated with a BFA in theater studies from Niagara University. And then 2 years later, I moved to LA and I studied the Meisner technique for 2 years. And then after that, I just started auditioning. And then we all know how auditioning is. It's not the greatest. So then I started creating.
But there's so many aspects into your origin story to touch up on, especially the part where your parents in a way, said, you got to go to college. And that's one area that I see, especially for the performing arts, be it dancer, a painter, or YouTuber, Well, right now you can make money off of anything if you have the passion for it. And parents are always in the way as an obstacle, saying, no, you can't do this. You have to go to school to be that. And that is not the path where the person wants to take. And of course, they don't pursue the dreams because of that.
I agree with you. Both my parents were educators, and so they feel that education is extremely, extremely, extremely important. So I really didn't have a choice. I mean, I guess I could have. I guess I could have been like, no, I'm going to go to New York. But I was scared. I was terrified. I was 18. I had no idea how to live life or whatever. But I agree. And it's funny too. Last year, kind of around this time, my mom came out. She came to a film festival with me in Las Vegas. And so we had a lot of one-on-one time with each other, 4 hours in the car and, hanging out at the festival and having breakfast and stuff like that. And she did turn to me and she did say, I wonder where you would be if you didn't go to college, if you did go straight to New York and you did what you wanted to do.
Right.
And then I try to, ease that concern and told her, everything happens for a reason. And it's true.
Right.
Because had I not gone to college, I never would have met the people that I did meet. I never would have grown up and I never would have been on my own. Like growing up in the area that I was, everybody went to college in Boston. So you either lived at home or you were like 40 minutes away from home. So you could easily just hop on the train and go home and see your parents or whatever. I didn't. I went 8 hours away. So whenever there was a crisis, I didn't have family. And that's what's happening to me now. Like all my family lives 3,000 miles away. I'm pretty much like on my own besides like some close friends and my boyfriend and stuff. But I mean, everybody that is so close to me and family and stuff is on the other side of the country. So I think going to college helped me kind of prepare for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And the other thing for your origin story will have to be the auditioning phase. And a lot of actors and actresses, now I've seen the shift. Instead of waiting for that phone call from the director, they saying, fuck that. And they start creating their own thing, whether it be YouTube, Facebook, and now Instagram with Instagram TV. I think that's the future right now. The content is in the hand of the performer.
It really, really is. And for there to be, as an actor to challenge yourself, you really have to create your own stuff. Because if we really look at what's in the box office right now, it's all very safe. It's all like all these new television shows that are coming out are all like remakes, or they're taking an idea that's already been done and was already successful and they're bringing that back. And to me, that's boring. Like I would have rather not had another Halloween movie. I would rather create a new slasher killer, create a new story. Let's make a new franchise. Let's do something daring and something out there, and let's be creative. And everybody's terrified. They're terrified of creating new stuff because they're like, oh, it won't make money. Oh, people aren't going to like it. Well, you don't know unless you do it. People may love it,
Absolutely.
So,
and there's two sides of that coin. I've seen it from my peers here in the journalistic aspect of the horror front. Most of them are in favor of a remake. Others aren't. And there's always that clash. Hey, and I agree with you. We need original content. Freddy, Michael Myers, Jason, they're all good, sure. But that's like we're getting Frankenstein, the werewolf guy. We don't need those anymore. We need fresh stuff.
I totally agree with you. We're in a new era where there are different things. Like if we're looking at Freddy, if we're looking at Jason, if we're looking at Michael Myers, those are all 80s stories. We are now in 2018.
Right.
A lot has changed. You can play with so much, So I really wish someone would just come out and just be bold and be brave and make a new monster. I think that would be great.
And that's a great thing about the independent scene. This is the platform where we have independent filmmakers, diversity. That's another important aspect of horror. We have Latinos, we have African American, we have women in horror really shaping fresh ideas. And I hope in time, sooner than later, Hollywood would pick up these independent filmmakers and then we could have some fresh content.
I hope so too. Because there have been certain statements. I don't know if you ever want to get into it. There was a certain statement by a certain man who owns, something. And that statement was really annoying. It was annoying because he's only saying it from his perspective.
Right.
Whereas if you really look at what is going on, there are so many of us that have been working so hard, and we've been working so hard for years, coming up with new creative content. We're putting ourselves out there, and we've been working very quietly because we want quality over quantity. And I think he got a lot of tweets about that. So
right. And you jumped the gun. I was going to deliver. I was going to deliver that question, and we all know who the certain person is, Jason Blum from Blumhouse. And your interview for this 100 podcast, you're going to be joining another interview that I had recorded previously. She's a co-founder for the Women in Horror Film Festival, Vanessa Inota Wright. She's also a filmmaker, and I relayed the same question to her. It's true in a way, and I'll state it again. Jason Blum is a fantastic, smart businessman because he takes low-cost product and he makes a huge profit. That's business 101. Now, when it comes to horror, I don't think he has his ear to the ground on what's going on because he views horror as a product as opposed to a community. And that's what his fault with his comment was. Agreed.
I feel like a lot of times when people start from nothing and then they build themselves up into something really big, sometimes people forget where they came from. They forget about the struggle. They forget about all those other people that were there, really putting their all and trying their all. Because then when you're in this whole different bracket, you forget about that. And
right.
I think in that statement, he completely forgot that, hey, you know what? We're still here. We're still around. We're still fighting the good fight. You
Absolutely.
may be somewhere else, but we're doing it. So
yeah,
I think it was a good reminder for him too.
It's true. And perhaps I would see it from the other point of view. He probably, his brain said something and his mouth said something else. Because
totally.
As an interviewer, I feel comfortable relaying the questions. Being on the other side, I've found myself saying, damn, did I say that? And I can't go back to tell the person, hey, I misquoted myself. So it could be that too. Or probably he had too much to drink, or we never know. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or he could have been misquoted or something,
right.
You never know.
Exactly. Now, your alter ego, Queen Malvolia. How did this idea come about? And how do you see yourself with this new character, this new redirection of a horror hostess, now that we have social media at your disposal?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see yourself?
Well, originally, Malvolia wasn't supposed to be what she is. Honestly, I was trying to write a feature film for a franchise, and I was trying to think outside the box and touch upon something in horror that wasn't being talked about. And it was a found footage franchise. So when I was coming up with the idea, I then pitched my idea, and it got politely declined, which is cool because everything, again, happens for a reason. And
exactly.
I was able to take full control over what I was doing. So I was still going to proceed along with the feature film. And then in my mind, I was like, well, I was really big about Blair Witch at the time, the original Blair Witch, and what they did as far as marketing and stuff like that, and how they made it seem like these people were really missing. And was it a documentary or was it real? And so I really wanted to play upon that, because with social media that we have, we can play these little fun adventure games with viewers and audiences and stuff. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to make a horror hostess I want to make her real. So the idea was I was only going to do maybe 10 episodes of a web series, kind of introduce her, put her out there on the internet, make her alive there, and then go into this feature film. And what happened was, as I was writing, I was realizing she worked better as a web series than she would in a feature film, though I have not erased that. And then people then started to like her. I honestly didn't think people would like her. I honestly thought people would be like, oh, you're copying Elvira. You're a wannabe. You know, this is too similar to what other things are going on. And I just thought that, honestly, as soon as I introduced her, I was just going to get hate. And I didn't. I got love. And I was so taken aback by that. And I was like, well, this is obviously something that people like and they enjoy and they want it. And so I've just been doing the best I can with what I have ever since.
But to touch on what you mentioned, from one aspect, the people may say, okay, you're copying from Elvira, but in my opinion, Elvira really copied from
Vampira.
Thank you.
Yes.
Which, in my opinion, she was more sexier. And that's a topic for a different conversation. But no, it's all about taking a concept, reshaping it, and putting it into a different market. And this market right now is the year 2018 is a different. We don't have a hostess. We don't have a horror presenter, perhaps on a local TV show, which Vampira really got her start at. That's another platform that is untouched right now, because since we have social media, people think, oh, I'm not going to go on local television, but that's another way to really shape up the character.
Well, what is actually pretty scary is once I started stepping into this fake realm, horror hostess trying to introduce this character and pretend like I knew what I was doing when I really had no idea what I was doing. I got introduced to the whole horror hostess world. There are horror hostess and hosts all over the United States.
Okay.
There are some that are still doing public access TV. It's insanity. There is a database for horror hosts and horror hostesses.
Really?
And so I had no idea. I was like, oh, I'm touching upon something that nobody's thought about since like 1985 or whatever. Like, yeah, Cassandra's going to all these conventions or whatever, but I'm going to make it alive again. No, there are people that are really still doing it. So that was a whole experience in itself as well. And a good majority of them are very open and loving and warm too. And they're all like, they help spread the love. They help share everything. So it's crazy. This still does exist and people still are doing it.
See, look at that.
Which I had no idea either.
I never knew either.
Started doing it. Yeah.
That's creative. That's creative. And also I had a conversation which led to me reaching out to you for this interview. I was speaking to one of my peers, Steven, over at Possessed Radio, and I was telling him we need a horror hostess, someone, because I love goth industrial music, and I said we need a horror hostess that she's more goth and this, and he mentioned, hey, have you heard about Queen Malvolia? And I said, no, I haven't. Check her out, and here we are right now. To me, in my opinion, it's all about keeping the content, keeping the character alive, going on YouTube.
Yeah.
And the depressing thing at times with being a content creator, some videos may get 7 views, other may get 100 views, but it's just that constant grind.
Yeah, it really, really is. It's really keeping yourself relevant. I've been really fortunate too, where since I really put myself out there in the way that I did market myself when I was first coming out, I feel like I did it. I thought about it too. It wasn't something that I would like woke up the next day and was like, oh, I'm going to start releasing this thing. Like I spent 6 months really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with the character, how I wanted to present her, and where I wanted to go, because that was then going to lead into the feature film. I started making contacts with all the horror bloggers that I could. I started hitting up people that, podcasts and everything like that, saying, hey, I'm going to be coming out with this. Are you interested in talking about it? Blah, 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 blah. So I really presented her before I started really working on the web series, which I felt was my benefit, because now this is what happens to me all the time. I luckily got 1031 because Rocky Gray needed another element in that film to host his anthology film. And one of the directors was like, hey, I just connected with this horror hostess on Facebook. Why don't you check her out? And he checked me out and he was like, I love it. Let's do it. And, you know, I've been able to connect more with the East Coast horror scene because of that film. But had I had not, I feel like I'd still be kind of like stuck in my little West Coast LA area. So it's been really great. It's been a really cool experience. It's been interesting.
Congratulations to you, and all the best for your creative endeavors. Is I personally know the obstacles that comes with creating content every single day, planning, and there's so many things that you want to get done, but it doesn't get done. And that's all part of the love and dedication. And once again, it all goes back to not waiting for the director and that phone call. You're putting yourself out there.
Yeah, it's funny because I started this year out as I want to work with more directors. I want to audition more. I want to be a part of other people's projects. I don't want to necessarily always have to write my own projects, because I'm also an actress. I also, write a lot of short films, film a lot of short films and stuff. And so I really wanted to expand. And what it really comes down to is there is one role and there could be 500 people submitting for it. There could be 100 people auditioning for it. And there is only one slot. And so if we constantly wait for somebody to say, yes, you can do it, there may be years that go by. And I know deep within myself, I can't wait. I have so many things I want to say. I have so many things I want to do. I have so many people I want to kill that I just need to do it, you know?
Right. Funny that you mentioned kill. Yes. I have yet to see a female slasher antagonist, so perhaps that may come in the near future.
I've been writing.
Yeah, right.
Writing. Mm-hmm.
What is your outlook? Being a content creator, a female in horror, what is your outlook now with the diversity in horror, not only for women in horror, but for Latinos, African American? And what do you really want to see shape up, especially with Hollywood?
I would love for Hollywood to think outside the box and take some risks, take some challenges. If anybody ever looks at my casts, I try and make it as diverse as possible. I love having diversity and different views and feels and all of that stuff, all a part of this. That's what we as Americans are all about. And so we really need to embrace it and really need to start giving other people opportunities, and not just have to make like an Asian movie. Like, let's all just be together as one, and bringing all these different elements together. That's what I want and hope and feel like it's moving into, and I'm ready for it.
Right. And there's so many aspects to horror, especially with folklore from the Latino area, from African American. There's so many cultures that have some freaky folklore that converted into horror, it could really expand as a franchise.
Well, like La Llorona, I'm pumped to see that film. I can't wait to see what they did with that. I've heard that story so long. I was actually part of a feature film for a little while, where I was supposed to play La Llorona, and a lot of people are like, "White girl playing that role, what?" But it was kind of working with where they were going, and then it got into different hands, and so I was let go. But I'm really excited to see these things being made, and I'm excited to see these stories being told, because it's time. It's been time for years now,
Right. And also with creating content and having the day-to-day work ethic, what are some of the challenges and what are some of the advices when somebody has the 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 and creating content from, let's say, 11 to 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. there's no time in the day, but yeah, it is possible. What is your experience and what is your advice for that?
My advice is to just do it. Or if you're a person that really needs to schedule it in. There was a good chunk of time where I was going through terrible writer's block. Nothing was flowing, and I wasn't working creatively, and I was going to my shitty ass job, and I was miserable. And so I started to say to myself, okay, well, you get home from work at 3 o'clock. You sit down in front of that computer, and whether you write for an hour or you just stare at a screen for an hour, at least you know that you tried, you know? So there's like little goals and little obstacles that people really need to just really push themselves to do, because then it's easy to get out of that habit or that schedule. And then you kind of forget about what you're doing. You just really have to push ahead and just do it. I always say that in interviews, is like, you always just have to do it. Because if you wait for all your I's to be dotted and all your T's to be crossed, you may never ever do it. Something may happen, you know? So you just kind of have to just pick up and just go, and you're going to be exhausted. Like, I would say from July up until this morning, I was going, pushing. Like, I didn't have a day off. I never take a day off. And today was the first day I think I stayed in bed all day, because my body was like, you just can't anymore.
Right.
And that's going to affect your work. And, you know, it's okay. It's okay to have these days.
Yes.
But you just have to just do it.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I also agree with not having regret, because we only have a certain time in our life. And if once you're 80, 90 or whatever, if you're lucky to reach 100 and you say, wow, I wish I could have done this and this and that, it's too late. And then you have that regret. Might as well do it now, fail, because failure is a part of this whole content creation endeavor. And is through failure we learn.
I personally don't think anybody fails. If you set your mind to doing something and you do it, that's success, you know, because you did it. There are so many people that sit back and they don't do it, and they're angry and they're mad and they spit out hate constantly. You know, a lot of times that's just jealousy. It's just jealousy that people don't have the courage to do it or ask for the help to do it.
Right. So
if you do it and you don't see what you're looking for, keep doing it.
You mentioned that audiences, you had the fear that audiences may say that you would be imitating Elvira. And you just mentioned right now that for those who do spit that type of hate, it's jealousy. Did you develop the tough skin if and when those type of comments were to be projected towards your character?
Yes, I actually thought that was all I was going to do, because in reality, I was copying Elvira. I was copying Vampira, because I was making up this horror hostess for this feature film, which was going to be based upon like a lot of truths that some of them have been through. So I prepared myself for hate, and all I got was love. And that's what totally threw me, because I was like, oh my God, people like this. I really got to do this now. I really have to do this. And just been going ever since.
And that's what I see. The pros and cons with social media. You have the audience members that would really support you. You have those that would really want to put you down. And for those out there who are listening, who want to create content and have that fear of someone or a group of people putting them down because of the way they look or this and that, whatever the case may be, just go with it, because the ones who are critiquing you are in a way supporting you, because through their negativity, you just feed off of that and just get the positive off of that.
It's true. And in fact, like if this helps anybody as well, back in 2011, 2012, I was a part of a sci-fi comedy web series called Guides. It was about like the ancient alien theory. And I have fans with me to this day from them finding me through that web series. So you are going to find your people. They are going to be there for you. They are going to support you. They are going to think everything you do is amazing and great. And that is what helps you get you through the day. And that's what makes it all worthwhile. You know, you can just touch one person with just like this short film that you do. And it just really, really makes it all worth everything. The stress, the lack of money, the no money, the trying to get everybody together, the schedules, the lack of food you can provide your crew, all the hard work, all the time consuming, not being able to pay people. That's what makes it worthwhile, to have one person be like, you know what, I watched that and I really liked it.
Yeah, it is so true. I can relate to the whole, especially the no money part. This whole endeavor with DecayMag, funded out of pocket.
I feel you.
Oh, hey.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing the 9 to 5. I haven't done it since February of this year. And I said, good riddance. Things, as you had mentioned throughout your interview, things happen for a reason. And it's a challenge, but just got to focus on and persevere.
What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Exactly. I wholeheartedly agree with that. To close out the interview, some of your projects that you have in the works that you can share. I know you sometimes there's those projects you can't, but those that you can. And also, please feel free to add your social media handles and where people could tune in.
Yeah. Well, I just this past week released a short film on my YouTube page. It's called The Hunt. It was a little short film, really creepy, awful short film that we did just for fun because we ended up getting like this killer location. And so that's released on my YouTube page. It's definitely an adventure that you go on with two females. So check that out. I'm also going to be at Zed Fest here in Los Angeles all next week. My short film, The Deal, which went viral, is screening at the festival. And I'm also going to be on the women's filmmaking panel, talking about creative, fun stuff. And as far as future projects, I mean, Malvolia is going to be finishing up season 2. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I've been writing on a feature that I hope to get out next year. And then, you know, just kind of picking up little gigs here and there. Well, you can find me. It's at Queen Malvolia on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Or Facebook, I'm facebook.com/Jennifer Nangle, or on Twitter and Instagram, I'm Jennifer_Nangle. Or if you want to go to the YouTube page and check out that short film, it is J Nangle Actress, youtube.com/J Nangle Actress.
Wow, you have that memorized, those URLs.
I've said that a couple times. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, for this interview opportunity. And as I mentioned, all the best. Tip my hat off to you. I know content creation in an independent field is a challenge. You're doing great. I see wonderful things for you in the years to come.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm going to hit you up when they do happen.
Looking forward to that. Thank you so much. And enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Segment 2 exclusive interview. Vanessa Ioana Wright, co-founder. Women in Horror Film Festival.
Our second feature for segment 2 exclusive interview, we have Vanessa Ioana Wright, producer, director, writer, and co-founder for the Women in Horror Film Festival. According to her IMDb page, her writing credits begins in 2017 with the horror short Rainy Season. She also directed I Bake 'Em a Cake back in 2016, followed by Rainy Season and Be a Hero. Recently, she served as producer for Be a Hero and Mama's Boy. In this interview, we'll be delving on the various aspects of filmmaking, as well as the horror genre, diversity in horror genre, and the Women in Horror Film Festival, which took place in early October of this year, and it made its debut last year, October. Starting off the interview, please do share an origin story. I'd like to kick off the interview session with an origin story, a little bit about yourself, your career, and your great event, the Women in Horror Film Festival.
Sure, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Origin story. So I've basically been writing since I learned how to hold a pen, and kind of just fooled around with, filmmaking and screenwriting until I went to college and started to take it a little bit more seriously. And probably about 3 years ago, I decided to jump back into it professionally and started submitting some screenplays and decided to take the leap into directing and directed my first film. And then along that way, I met Sam, who was amazing, and we decided to launch the Women in Horror Film Festival together. And that basically brings us up to speed.
Oh, everything happened so quickly. I've been following your work. It seems like over the past, I would say 4 years, you released your first film. You started the festival, Women in Horror Film Festival, made its debut last year. To me, it seems so fast.
Yeah, it feels that way. It almost like it happened overnight. But it also, at the same time, I know people kind of use this when they talk about their kids and stuff, like the days are long, but the years are short. So it definitely feels like it's been quite a long road to get, I'd say, to this point. But yeah, I mean, Sam and I are both really very tenacious. And, it's kind of like when we think about doing something, we don't wait. We just say, okay, well, let's do it. And then we go full in and make stuff happen. Right.
Yeah. In my opinion, I think that's the best way, doing whatever you would like to do, especially in the creative field. Just do it at the spur of the moment, because once you start weighing the pros and the cons, then the cons start outweighing the pros and you never get to fulfill your dream.
Yeah, and there's always going to be challenges. There's never going to be a perfect time. I know a lot of people, you almost get frozen in the process, because it's like, well, we have to wait for this to happen, or we need to make sure we do this first. And it's like, no, let's just hit the ground running. We'll put all the pieces in place, and we'll cross those bridges when we come to them and solve problems as we go.
Right, absolutely.
Which is why I think we were able to do things so quickly, because we just kept pushing forward.
Exactly. And it also helps when you have a good partner to help you along the way. So that way, if you feel like you're in a hole somewhere and you can't get out, you have that professional support to say, hey, we got to complete this project or something like that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know there are people that, will take on large, projects and events all on their own, but it's like, oh, why do that to yourself? Like, find some people that have a similar vision and that you can trust and that you work well together with, and take some of that burden.
And going with your film career, you have, according to IMDb, 4 shorts beginning in 2016. I Baked 'Em a Cake, which we reviewed here on DecayMag, and the latest release, Mama's Boy, which you served as producer. With each of these films, the learning curve, especially when you jump into the filmmaking process, what were some areas that you have picked up, learned, and will integrate into, let's say, a full feature film?
I'd say the first thing I learned was that you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. You will be okay, and you should learn from them. It can be really daunting, especially if, you're heading up a production. I mean, if it's something that you've written, that you're directing, it's all eyes are on you. You're kind of the one that is steering that ship. And so if it goes south pretty quick, you're pretty much the one that's going to get blamed. And definitely I've kind of always have been open. I'm a very collaborative filmmaker, but I would even give that, I would say that as advice to people is be open to collaboration, because when you're just starting out, nobody knows everything. A lot of us go into this. There's a lot of things we still don't know. I mean, be open to, listening to other people's stories and wisdoms and things that they've learned, because, they're there to help. And, you should get better each time. The process should get a little bit smoother. You get a little bit more used to it. And I'd say, at the independent level, my goodness, you always need more people and more money. So I would say do your best to really kind of stretch those dollars and, get people on board. If people are willing to help, take it. Yes, come on board, help us.
Right. That is the crucial point for any indie filmmaker, is the money aspect. It does help the production in so many ways, but for productions that are below cost zero, in fact, well, excluding catering, because we all need catering. But you're right.
You have to feed people. That's something else I have to people. Do not skimp on food. Feed your cast and crew well. Exactly.
Even if it's a home-cooked meal, the cast and crew definitely deserve something to eat.
Yes. If you feed them, they will be happy to help you.
Exactly. And you're right. If there is no money involved, there's so many, especially with the cast, that are willing to jump in and just enhance their own performance resume just to be on the project.
Yeah. And I mean, look for those resources. I would say the biggest struggle for indie filmmakers, it does come down to funding, especially if you've got a project, you've done a budget, and you're like, we don't have all of the money we need. Try to, call in some favors. Somebody knows somebody who can help out. Even when it comes to food, the food actually can be quite expensive, but it doesn't hurt to ask. I know with Mama's Boy, we called every single local restaurant in the area, and we ended up with all 3 days, I believe, or maybe it was 2 shooting days, but we had all of our food donated.
Oh, wow.
Which was amazing. And it was good. Good food.
That's
you ever get a chance, ask Sam about those crab potatoes. They were amazing.
Ooh. It's true. It doesn't hurt to ask. And not only that, but you build relationships with local businesses, and they could get credit on the film. They have exposure, and you have food. And it's a good working system. Right. It's so interesting.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask for things.
Exactly. I think that's one area with filmmakers is afraid to ask. I've had some guests on the show that are still hesitant with using crowdfunding because they see it as a form of panhandling. And I believe Mama's Boy went on the crowdfunding platform to gain resources.
Yes. Yeah, we did. We crowdfunded. That was our second big crowdfunding campaign, because we did it with Rainy Season, and then we did it again with Mama's Boy. And it's not for everybody. If you are not comfortable asking people for money, I would not recommend doing it, because you have to ask a lot, like hourly, and bug people and send messages. And halfway through the process, you start to feel a little bit like a butthole, because you're just constantly begging.
Right.
And, you're going to annoy people and bug people, but, if you want it done, just stay persistent. Try to make sure you've got some pretty cool perks. We got really creative with the perks we were offering on Mama's Boy, just because, again, you have to be careful if you're offering people stuff that costs the production money.
Right.
Then you're having to make sure that you've got that budgeted.
Right. Or
so
something.
We tried to find things that would be really, really cool that really wouldn't, affect the bottom line.
Right. Or even something that doesn't affect time. Let's say something that you have to craft and it takes time out of your production. That's another downfall, right? And I see there's so many great resources for independent filmmakers. It's unbelievable. And another resource is the film festival circuit. And I would just jump into the Women in Horror Film Festival.
Yeah.
I see these platforms are great for indie filmmakers, especially now with diversity, Latinos, people of color, women in horror. There's a platform now for exposure. First of all, how did the whole idea come about, and how did everything just happen last year to get this off the ground?
Basically for that reason, Sam and I met at a film festival. And, we did happen to notice that there weren't a ton of women finalists, like actual filmmakers and screenwriters that were part of the fest. It was a very, very small percentage. And, as I started, and that was my first film festival that I'd ever been to. So as I started going to more and more, of course, Sam and I being both within the horror genre at the time, we were going to a lot of the same fests, and we kept remarking. I was like, where are all the women? Like, there's got to be more than just us, clearly. And we just started talking about it a little bit more. And, we had learned about Women in Horror Month, and we were like, oh, this is great. Like, there's an entire month dedicated to kind of showcasing women in the genre. There should be a film fest like that, and not just recognizing directors, but recognizing women in other key creative roles that maybe we don't see a lot, of recognition for. And that's kind of what launched it. We just, it started in a conversation, and then we were like, let's do it. Let's make it happen.
That's wonderful. It was a pleasure to have attended this year's event. There's so much positive energy with so much on the creative peers, everyone helping each other out, the networking aspect. And from seeing it firsthand, I'm like, wow, the horror genre is not dead at all. I mean, probably Hollywood is killing it with reboots, but right there you see so many creativity.
Oh my gosh. The programming, in the last 2 years, our first 2 years of doing this, the films are astonishing. One, the quality and level of talent of these filmmakers from around the world is mind-blowing. The fact that some of them, I'm like, why is your film not in a theater? I don't know. Somebody's got to know somebody. You need to find them because they're phenomenal. And I think that's part of it. We are seeing a lot of reboots, and it's nice when you get a chance to see some of these independent films that, especially at a festival, because you might not see those anywhere else except at a festival.
Right.
And it's so refreshing. And it's, I'd say, especially with the genre, I think a lot of people, especially even now, when they're like, oh, women in horror, I don't like blood and guts. It's like, no, horror is so much more than that. And that's something we really strive with our programming, is to show really thoughtful, artistic films.
Absolutely. And in my opinion, I don't think there is any other genre that showcases a social commentary, a focus on psychology, as well as the horror genre. Yeah, sure, there's blood and guts in some aspects, but that's primarily what horror is about.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's something about that genre that gives you the freedom to like tap into all of those kind of things that might otherwise be taboo in a typical drama, or anything else. It's kind of like you've almost got free reign. I mean, you're already dealing in a universe, in a realm where pretty much anything goes. So why not, use your voice to make a comment?
Absolutely. Yeah, so true. Of course, this comment that I had heard Jason Blum, I'm sure you're aware, he made such a ridiculous comment. What is your opinion on this? I'll say, first of all, my opinion is he's a great businessman. He could churn out product, low-cost product, and receive a high profit. That's just like here in New York City, we have Chinatown. You could get the knockoffs for $1 and you think you got a Rolex, but it's really a Folex. So I could understand his not understanding the horror landscape. What's your opinion on what he had to say about women in horror?
So I'll be honest with you. I think, you can take anything kind of out of context. I mean, yes, we saw the entire article and what he had said, but who knows what the parameters were around the interview? Was he rushed? He might not have been thinking fully. He might have, it's hard when you're on the spot. I mean, right. I'm nowhere near the level of Jason Blum, and even just talking to you makes me nervous. I'm like, oh, what am I going to say? So, I think, I don't know that it was necessarily intended to come across the way it came across. It sounded extremely kind of, honestly ignorant, but, it's hard. I don't know. I see, we were given one side of it, basically, right. But I think rather than trying to persecute the man and take it to a very dark, negative place, let's look at it as opportunity. If he really feels like he doesn't know enough, female directors or hasn't seen enough content coming, from women within the genre, then let's show him. Let's not just point fingers and make things bad. It's like, we even tweeted out like, hey, we know of some amazing women in horror. Come to the fest. The invitation is open. We'll send you a list of amazing people. So I think when things like that happen, it's kind of important to take a minute, take a breath, and, not necessarily grab our pitchforks right away, but think about how we can turn it into a positive.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you because when you're being interviewed, sometimes the first thing that pops into your head is what you eject from your mouth. When I was at the Women in Horror, I got interviewed, and after the interview, it's like, oh, I misquoted myself.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you forget what you might beforehand think of like, oh, I have all these really great, thoughtful, eloquent things I want to say. And then someone starts talking to you and you're like, well, I don't remember. I don't know the names of people. I can't remember anything I've ever seen. Like, it disappears.
Right. And especially after a few drinks, everything sounds good in your head.
Yeah. No, luckily I haven't had any drinks yet today, so we're good.
For the Women in Horror, one of the topics in the panel was diversity. Being that more festivals are now focused on the diversity in the horror genre, in the next 5 years, what is your outlook and how horror would change?
I hope that it continues to evolve. I hope that we do see more diverse voices in storytelling, because I think it's important to share those stories, and I think it's important to share different perspectives. Are we going to be, at an ideal place in 5 years where everything is equal and great? Probably not. But, you strive for improvement, not perfection. And as long as we see progress, then I think, we're doing our job.
It's so true. I think, in my opinion, that this whole shift now, especially with women in horror, is the portrayal of the women running in the woods is long gone, and now we have good visions behind the camera and in writing. I've seen the whole evolution.
Sure.
It's happening a little later than it should, in my opinion, but I'm glad it's starting right now with full force.
Yeah, and I think it's more that there's a lot more awareness.
Right.
And a lot more, think about it. I mean, we've got so much technology at our fingertips that, it's easy to get in front of people now. I mean, even if you look 10, 20, 30 years ago, I mean, things were so different. Even the landscape of independent film is different. I mean, my goodness, you can literally make a film on your phone and upload it to YouTube and have thousands of people seeing your work. We didn't have that until relatively recently.
Yeah, I agree. We are living in such great times with social media and the technology, our mobile devices. And you're right. I just saw a commercial the other day, just 2 new mobile devices. Whoa, I would like to get that as a camera. I have a camera here I don't even use.
Absolutely. I think it was when they launched, I forget which installment of the iPhone it was, but one of them in the entire commercial, it was gorgeous and it was beautiful. At the end, it was like shot on the iPhone, whichever one it was, 8, and it's like just that right there. It's like, I mean, think about it. Like, it's mind boggling. It's like you're living in the future. I mean, I grew up, my parents had a Super 8 film camera, which eventually got turned into the VHS home movie camera that was like, 20 pounds and huge. And, if you were lucky, you'd get yourself some VHS tapes for Christmas and then, Christmas morning, go make a silly movie and then your friends and family would watch it and that's it.
Right.
It's like, we've come so far with what we're able to do with having resources to, and not just for entertainment purposes. I mean, look at social media itself. Like you can say and do and share anything. It's good and bad. I think, there's definitely a downside to being this connected. But I think as long as you're one of the good ones and you're trying to use your voice, again, kind of for positive change, then use the tools and the technology that we have here.
Yeah. And one area that I find surprising, especially with casting, is I've heard the story that the directors look at the actors' social media to see how many people are following them. And based on that, they get hired for their role. I find that to be such a negative. The person with less followers could have much better talent to portray that particular role.
Yeah, I personally, as a director, I would never do that. I always try to look at who's going to be the best performer, for the film, for the role, regardless of following or not. I understand at a certain point, if you're trying to get out there, if you've got investors looking at your work, maybe having a name attached helps, but that's a different, kind of thing altogether. I mean, I would say the other side of that, the most I would use social media for as far as checking up on people are, people you're going to be working with and hiring as far as crew and cast and everything else is how are they portraying themselves publicly, and is it somebody you want to work with?
Yeah, that is so true. That's where the spine comes in.
Yeah. And, you hear a lot of people like, oh, it's just social media. You can say and do whatever you want. It's like, sure, you can. Like, it's great that we're in a place and time where we have the freedom to basically say and do whatever we want. But regardless of that, you have to understand there's still consequences. Like, go ahead and do it, but don't be surprised if there's a consequence to that action.
So true. there is a limit, especially when you're in the public eye or in the performing arts. You're scrutinized for the littlest things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I always look at it like, if you're going to put anything out to the public that's going to have a lot of eyes on it, like, you really have to think about it, and you have to be completely okay, good and bad, with what it will bring. And if you're not, then I wouldn't put it out there.
Right. A funny story right there, because I purchased a onesie for Halloween. I was going to take a picture, put it on. It's the onesie from Jack Skeleton. And I took the picture, yes, and I had the hoodie on, and I was going to post it, say, wait a second, this hoodie, it looks too white supremacist, because the hoodie's white, if you know Jack Skeleton's. No, I cannot post that at all. So that's one prime example right there. Yeah,
I mean, I think people are too quick in the moment to kind of hit that, post button. You do sometimes need to think a little bit before you start putting stuff out to the world. Even if you're just sending it to a friend or in a text message, like, nothing is private, nothing is sacred. Someone can always get something via a screenshot or anything else. So if you're about to send it over the wire, know that anybody's going to see it, and everybody.
Oh, so true. And closing out our interview, I have a couple of questions. Seeing that you have a lot of submissions for the Women in Horror Film Festival, do you see a different trend emerging? Usually we have the French extremism. They had their moment. Japan had their moment. Do you see filmmakers are shifting towards a one particular area in horror cinema?
I wouldn't say that I'm seeing anything shift to any one thing. I will say we get quite a wide variety of films and stories. I'd say the biggest trend we probably saw this year, and it was more kind of subject matter versus like the actual style of storytelling, was a lot more kind of female empowerment. And a lot of that probably has to do with our fest and our mission. We're probably going to, get a lot of more like really strong kind of stories like that. We also did get a lot of, there's a lot of cannibalism this year.
Yes.
I don't know if we're leaving zombies and going to cannibalism. That was one thing we saw a lot of.
Yes, I do remember, especially the screenplay reading. It was one behind the other. I say, wait a second, was that a trend right there?
Yeah. Cannibals are so hot right now.
But it's a parallel, in my opinion. After that segment, I say, there's a parallel of this whole trend of cannibalism, and somebody really brought it up during the speaking part, that it's people eating each other, not literally but figuratively, especially with social media.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think if you really kind of break down the psychology of it, I mean, I know they did that, with the whole zombie trend and kind of like this loss of control. And, I think the same thing with cannibalism. It's this, kind of all consuming, theme. And it would be interesting to like actually talk to like a psychologist, about that, and kind of see, what they think of the trend and get like a more of a professional perspective of it.
Hey, that's a great idea for next year's panel. The whole psychology panel.
Well, absolutely. We'll get a team of PhDs up there to tell us what the heck is wrong with all of us.
That would be informative and hilarious.
Yeah. Yes.
To close out our interview, what other projects do you have in the works? And also, please do share where audiences could find you on social media, your handle, Women in Horror's handle.
Sure. I'm actually working on a feature script right now, and it's not horror, if you can believe that. It's a heartwarming comedy of all things. But I'm kind of keeping the focus on women in horror right now as we gear up. For year 3, we're going through a few changes, so we're going to get that going for everybody. And as far as finding me and the fest online, you can find Women in Horror on all 3 major platforms: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And the website, it's WIHFF.com. And I'm also on all 3 of those platforms as Creepy Girl with a K. I'm not hard to find. I'm pretty out there.
Oh, congratulations and best of luck to you with your feature film. I'm sure it's a challenge in itself, and that's one area I would say whoever does comedy, I tip my hat off, because that's a difficult genre in itself right there.
It is, but you know what? I'm surrounded by so many funny people, and I've had so many funny things happen in life that I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna write all this stuff down, because it's hilarious. I hope the rest of the world finds it hilarious as well. We'll see. Otherwise, we'll be like, no, please go back to horror. You're not funny.
It's great to branch out. That's one thing in the performance arts. Always go to different fields and test the waters.
Yeah, absolutely. Challenge yourself. Don't limit yourself in any way.
Right. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for your time, for this interview. And thank you for the Women in Horror Film Festival. A great platform, and looking forward to next year's event.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Segment 3 Movie News. Film Mode Entertainment. 101 Films International. Acquire Rabbit.
News has surfaced that Film Mode Entertainment and 101 Films International have acquired the remake of Rabid. And as we all know, that is the 1977 film by David Cronenberg. And for this reboot, we have the Soska sisters, Jen Soska and Sylvia Soska, writing the reboot and also directing. For those who are living under a rock and who do not know who the Soska sisters are, they made their huge debut in the 2012 slasher film American Mary, and have since skyrocketed and solidified themselves as women in horror female directors, and really chiming out some original content, not only for horror but also for action, with their contract with WWE Films. Joining me as special guest co-host for the second segment of our 100th episode is Dan Lee from Dan of the Dead blog. Thank you for joining me for this final segments of our podcast.
I actually managed to keep my cool at 2017 at the Women in Horror Film Festival. I'm actually doing an interview at the time with Lynn Hansen, who's a filmmaker, artist, just very creative person, just in general. An excellent example of what Women in Horror is bringing out. And as we're sitting there, we get invited to come and join the Soska sisters at breakfast, and we're just sitting there and talking to them about film and all sorts of incredible horror related things. And it was one of those moments like, did this just happen? And it was hard not to be a fanboy for a minute there.
Right. That only happened to me once. Before we go straight away from the topic, I gotta inject this one. That only happened to me once with one interviewee, and after the interview, I said, "Hey, not for nothing. I love your work." He's a musician, by the way, Ronan Harris from V&V Nation. And after the interview, I was like, "Wow, I've followed you guys for 25 years. Can I have an autograph?"
Yeah.
I broke the code of the journalist side, but hey, that was once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's kind of like the Soska's remaking Rabid. I mean, that is right there a David Cronenberg classic. I mean, easily one of the better. You could almost. It's got a lot of elements of a zombie film in it, but there's so much more to Rabid than that. And when it comes to body horror and Cronenberg, I can't think of better people to be involved in remaking something than the Soskas. Right,
and this acquisition of Rabid, this is coming off the heels, hot off the press, because as we all know, AFM, the American film market, is where independent filmmakers or I want to say low budget, but mid-range budget horror films or any type of films are being shopped for investors or buyers or distributors. This is a do or die platform for any film, and it's congratulations to the Soskas. It's obvious they were going to get it picked up. They have the name recognition. I just can't wait to see how this film is going to work out. And for what you just mentioned, Dan, I have a quote here from the producer Paul Lalonde, alluding to the remake from David and how it would parallel. He says, quote, "I don't think there are any bigger fans of David Cronenberg than the Soska twins. They put their own stamp on the movie, of course, but with nothing but the utmost respect to David. And that's important when you're remaking a classic film like Rabid," unquote. The topic of reboots always comes up. In this case, I'm going to have to let my guard down and say I'm anticipating, I'm eagerly waiting to see what they come up with.
Yeah, I'll just say it. I'm not a big fan of remakes and reboots and all the regurgitation that happens in film. And there have been a lot of great titles to have been remade in the last 20 years, and some of them are just cringe inducing when you hear that they're remaking them. But this is one of them that when you hear that it's being remade, of course, hearing that any classic horror film is being remade, you instantly just cringe at the thought. But then when you hear who is remaking it, who's writing the script, who's directing it, who is taking control of it, then you get to breathe a sigh of relief. That's what I'm doing as far as Rabid, because it's a fantastic film, and with two people at the helm of it that are as talented, as devoted to film, to horror films, and to the works of David Cronenberg as the Soskas are, I have no doubt that this is going to be amazing. And I've been pleasantly surprised by other remakes in the years. I'm sure I'll lose some horror fan street cred with this. I enjoyed Rob Zombie's Halloween. And that's a divisive one right there in the horror community if you talk to people. And I get why, but overall, as far as updating the story and making it more relatable to a modern audience, and opening it up to a modern audience, because that's a lot of what these remakes and reboots are doing as well. There's plenty of them that are just shamelessly going after nostalgia so they can fill a producer's wallet somewhere. But there's even more that are just legitimately being made by true fans of the franchise, of the film, that want to see a more updated take, that want to take the story and bring it into a new generation. You know, Evil Dead was another good one. And I'm a diehard, Deadite. And Evil Dead was, in 2013, was one of those that they brought it into the modern age. They didn't do a bunch of pandering and try and cram in cameos and this and that. They actually made a scary film in the spirit of the original. And I'm pretty certain that's what we're going to see here when Rabid gets released.
Right. I am going to have to agree with you. My co-host and I, we always have angst or a repulsion whenever we hear a reboot is being made. And once in a blue moon, we have great reboots. And you made a great point with the Evil Dead reboot. I found that grittiness. And another film that had that gritty, it was The Hills Have Eyes. The first one, not the second one. The second one was kind of corny in my opinion. But the first one, the reboot, gritty. They followed frame by frame almost to the T. But it was just that rawness, that the violence. Oh, okay. This is it really adapts to modern audiences.
Yeah, it's one of those that the original was so shockingly violent, and in an era of PG-13 horror, to actually take a classic from the 70s, 80s, arguably the golden age of horror cinema, and to bring it back to the screen with that same level of shocking violence, of storytelling, of genuine fear and disgust. And I mean, it's impressive. It's hard to do.
Right. I'm looking forward to Rabid. The same. I really am following your opinion here. The Soska sisters, they have great IMDb credits. I've seen their filmography. Some of the films were kind of iffy. The action film with WWE, that was a revenge film. Wasn't horror, so I can't really weigh my opinion on that. I like action, but my meat and potatoes is horror. But their filmography in horror and what they have accomplished is stellar, and especially with their film American Mary, that was really thinking outside the box. And I'm looking for those who don't know the film Rabid. It's about the protagonist Rose. She's a young woman who, after an accident, scars her beyond recognition. So she undergoes a radical, untested stem cell treatment. While turning Rose into the belle of the ball, the experiment transformation comes at a horrific price. That parallels much as what David Cronenberg was doing, but they added their own flavor with the stem cells and modern technology. And with that sense, I think this is going to be something that would step on the top ladder, the top tier of a remake or a reboot.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. I think because I mean, it's a great story to work with, and if you're familiar with David Cronenberg's filmography, there are a lot of thematic elements from Rabid that were kind of pulled from an earlier film he did called Shivers. And it again was, scientific experimentation gone awry, causing this sort of, with everything Cronenberg has done that I've watched, there are always elements of sex and sexuality that are brought up, as well as this body modification horror. You know, seeing people transform and change horrifically by these experiments gone awry.
Yes. I'm still shivers. Now, close out this segment. Was that the film in which the people that were getting infected were sexual deviants? That's not the one, right?
Well, yeah. See, I'm trying to remember if it was that or I think the one you're talking about is Breeders.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. Shivers was Slither in 2006 took a lot of heat because people said it was just ripping off Shivers.
I see. I bring up the one I'm referring to because I've only seen it once on TV, didn't catch the name, and I've been eager to see that the one I'm referring to would be great as a reboot. It's so perverse for its time. I was like, wait a second, these people are getting infected by a bug and all you want to do is just have sex. Who comes up with this shit?
The Devil Makes 3 anthology in development.
Well, Dan, you and I, we both attended the Women in Horror Film Festival, and I think our opinions are the same, that women in horror, they have a huge contribution to the genre, despite what Jason Blum had alluded to in his comment. And that comment, believe you me, for our first and second interview, I forwarded that question. But it just goes to show you that women have such a force, such a presence in this genre.
They really do. I mean, and people don't. I mean, your average movie viewer isn't going to care, you know, who was the cinematographer, who did the lighting. You know, they might care who the director was, but they're focused on the story, the entertainment value, and the actors portraying the characters. Meanwhile, it's the real fans of the genre, it's the fans of cinema, it's filmmakers and artists and creators that get more into, well, that shot was so well framed up, you know, who was the DP? You know, the lighting. I mean, I've seen some films where just the choice in lighting has brought out some truly terrifying images with the photography. And, you know, people don't realize that women are behind the scenes. You know, these very creative women are doing all of this.
That is so true. And that brings us to our next topic, which is an anthology film that is currently in development, in production, is titled The Devil Makes 3. We have a whole the whole film is a female-driven horror anthology, has 3 stories. This stars Najara Townsend, Tammy Baird, and also we have cinematography by Sung Rae Shu. Right now, they have a Kickstarter campaign where they're going to be getting some funding, and the production is going to begin in January. This is one of the prime examples of women contributing to horror. We are seeing not only a production that is partially with women behind the scenes. Let's say they're working on the production aspect or the director aspect, and the rest are male. Here we are seeing more films that is all female driven, and that's great. This is the diversity that we should be seeing, hoping that Hollywood takes note and really adapts for their high budget film projects.
Yeah, and what we're also seeing is, you know, it would be so easy to see women at the helm of these films and literally just flipping the script around and objectifying and doing the same thing to their male characters that have been done to women in film since the beginning of cinema. But they're moving beyond that. You know, Women in Horror Film Festival, again, a great one. or they didn't just focus on directors and writers. They focused on women in every aspect of the film. And what we find is that they're creating more inclusive, open environments where creativity by anyone is welcome, regardless of sex or position or what have you. And that's making for some truly unique and entertaining films that are coming out now.
Yes, I have to agree with you there. And hopefully we see that shift in Hollywood. And with the topic that we have here, the Devil Makes 3, I enjoy anthology series because you have the best of both worlds. You have a full feature film, and you also have short films integrated with one core subject. And here we have a psychological thriller that revolves around a slasher film in the form of a white-knuckle roller coaster ride where two motorists are terrorized by a strange woman on a desolate stretch of country road. And then we have another film that is an occult mystery folk horror hybrid where a journalist accompanies her fiancé to meet her future in-laws, but discovers that her strange customs hide a deeper malevolence. And just by reading the synopsis alone, it sounds original, especially with the first one. And the first interview that we had with our first co-host, I had mentioned, hey, wouldn't it be great if we have a female slasher? Hey, yes. And here we have one in this short film.
and you know, there's so much to be done with that idea. You know, a lot of the old, what you could almost consider female slasher films from like the 70s and 80s, things like I Spit on Your Grave, they're not genuine slashers in that they're more revenge pieces. They're more women that have been terribly wronged, that have been physically and mentally abused, going back and seeking out justice. And whereas a slasher, you literally just have somebody who has snapped, gone off the deep end, and is out there just indiscriminately killing. And it's terrifying. You just classically have not been taught to think that women are capable of such horrifying things because of a nurturing sort of vibe, of a nurturing sort of instinct in them.
Right. Yeah. Interesting perspective there. Yes, it's true. And although to close out the segment, it also relates to the use of children in horror films and how they're projected as evil, and that's a ploy because children are, of course, innocent and lovable and all this good stuff that we associate with kids, but yet you have films like The Omen that turns everything upside his head, and you look at a child and like, okay, are you a spawn of Satan, or are you a good innocent little kid? So I can understand that perspective, which is an interesting one.
Yeah, and you know, things like The Omen and Children of the Corn, they take that, you know, you're unsuspecting of them because they're children. And it's the same thing with a female slasher. You're unsuspecting of her. You know, if you ask anybody that picks up a hitchhiker, you know, they're more likely to pick up a woman than a man because, oh, she's just some sweet lost little girl here. We'll give her a ride home. And they don't take into account that, you know, maybe that veneer, maybe that societal appearance of this innocent, helpless, you know, victimized looking character is just a mask to hide something truly evil.
Interesting. We someone needs to come up with this slasher concept right away.
Yes.
15-second film challenge begins.
Well, then, I'm not sure. Have you heard of the 15-second film challenge in which filmmakers across diverse experience levels submit a short 15-second film, and it will fall into the hands of judges. And this is the 4th year, so every year they have celebrity judges, including entertainment journalists, that would get this slate of films and decide which ones are best, first place, second place, third place in its distinct fields. We were so thrilled last year. We were selected to be on the judging panel for a few of these films. And let me tell you, it's so difficult to choose 3 films out of the batch, because each one is so individual in their own perspective. To convey a frightening scene in 15 seconds, that's difficult. But I'm surprised there's so many creative individuals across the globe.
Oh yeah, well, and I have heard of the 15-second film challenge, and I love it just because as a short story author, I love any short form horror. You know, to me, this is the film equivalent of flash fiction, and I mean it's one thing to have 5 minutes to tell a fully realized horror story that conveys to you that sense of fear and dread, but you're talking 15 seconds. I mean, 15 seconds is just, it's the blink of an eye. And it's insane how good some of these films really are and the kind of story they convey.
Right. Yeah. The average commercial on TV is 30 seconds. We're talking 15, half the time of a commercial to make you want to buy the next soap product to wash your dishes. Here we have something that is supposed to terrify you. And like I said, I was surprised. There's so many times we had to review, I would say, more than 30 films, and to select from 3 different categories, three selections out of each category. And one was an animated film for 15 seconds. Animation. I was surprised. Wow, the time it takes to create that must have been a week's worth just for 15 seconds. That blew me away.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of work that goes into any of these films, and then you take something like animation or stop motion, and you think about how much time, you know, you're not talking about 15 seconds that was literally shot in the course of 15 seconds. I mean, you're talking location scouting, writing, just creating the idea first. You're talking recording hours of film and weeding it down to that perfect 15 seconds to submit to these judges.
Right. And this is the 4th annual kickoff for the 15-second horror film challenge. Reading off the press release that we received, over 500 entries. Wow.
Yeah, I was just reading that. Over 500.
500. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. From all over the world.
Yeah. I mean, and it is such a, I mean, the stories that you're going to see with this are just beyond compare. And it's the sort of thing that you can literally take 30 minutes. It's the right format, you know, for the Twitter age, for people that, you know, you've got 20 minutes on your lunch break. You got 10 minutes to stand outside and smoke. So how many films can you watch in that period before you go back on the clock?
Right. You make a very good point. We are living in an age of instant gratification where, unfortunately, kitten videos that are 10 seconds long go viral, yet you're making a film, a 30-minute film, and you dedicate your time and your blood and your sweat, and you barely get 2 views. That's the sad state of affairs.
Yeah, I mean, and my son, he loves Musical.ly, or I think they've changed the name now to TikTok.
Right.
And it's very much like Vines, you know, it's these 15 seconds, and there's an entire generation of horror fans right now that are coming up that they've grown up with this sort of, you know, very extreme short format that video that they've been seeing thanks to things like Musical.ly and Vines. And now we're seeing them not only begin to consume these kind of films that are being made, but you're seeing people that have devoted their time to doing a lot of these that are now saying, hey, this sounds like a cool thing. Let me give this a try. Let me make a 15-second horror film. And you're going to see a lot of just incredible perspectives and a lot of incredible ideas just brought into that very short space.
Right. And I tip my hat off to Andrew J.D. Robinson. Not only did he put this 15-second horror film challenge into its 4th year, but he's also a filmmaker. We had the chance to review most of his films. He released a couple over this month, last month actually, and the work that he goes into contacting top names in the horror industry to be celebrity guest judges for this film festival. Let's say there's a whole slate. I'm not going to read each one. We're going to provide it in the podcast notes.
I was just sitting here marveling at some of these names. Like there's Laura Ortiz, Felissa Rose, Ellie Church, Kansas Bowling is on here, as well as, you know, Lloyd Kaufman. I mean, just there are some huge names to me in independent film and in horror film. And then you're also seeing groups like Spooky Astronauts and Horror Hound that are getting in this, and I know they change up this list every year too. So there's this great cross section of the horror entertainment industry that's getting a chance to go through these videos, and I mean, I both envy them and I don't envy them, because how do you just weed out all of these great films into this handful that's going to play for everybody?
Right. I tell you, I thought it was going to be easy. 15 seconds. I'm just going to watch these, and no, it's quite difficult.
Yeah,
it is quite difficult. And yeah, as you admit, you tossed in some names, and looking at this list, is a lot of interesting persons in the horror industry. Amazing stuff. And you never know what could emerge from this scene, that a top name person is looking at your work, critiquing your work. They may say, hey, they pick up the phone or send you an email, say, I like your idea, let's move forward with something on a grander scale. You never know what could materialize from something like this.
Yeah, and I mean, just getting into that 500 plus, getting into that top 40 or 50, you know, just whether it reaches the broad audience you were hoping to or not, having some of these people look at it and say, man, I'm impressed by this. Just the sort of boost that would be, you know, to morale, to say, you know what, keep doing it, keep on at it, because it's getting somewhere, it's getting noticed.
Halloween release of Covadonga.
Halloween is a great date to release a short film. Most persons, while they're going out with their dress as whatever character they may be, going to a party, others like to enjoy and partake in watching or binge watching horror films. And in this case, we have the release of Covadonga, which is a gothic Irish folk horror freakout about a widowed songwriter at a wooded lake house who sees his dark past pervading when a mysterious young couple trespasses on his property. The story explores the inevitable darkness of life, our response to it, and how that dictates the world we live in, both through a personal tale of loss and a historical conflict that persists to this day. Interesting concept here with the synopsis. What is your take on this film, Dan, given this interesting synopsis?
Well, to begin with, I'm glad you're the one who said the name of the film, because I love hearing Gaelic names and old Irish words, and I'm sure this has some sort of old Irish pronunciation that sounds really good with some sort of brogue. But yeah, I mean it sounds very interesting, and just from the just from that brief description, I mean, a songwriter alone in the woods with that sort of dark past, just this amorphous sort of darkness hovering over him, which doesn't come out until he actually encounters people. I mean, there's so much potential there for any number of stories to come out of this. And of course, in that Gothic style, I mean, I'm interested to see this. I'm really interested to see where this goes.
Right. And so far, Covadonga is going into the film festival circuits, and it won Best Film, Best Narrative, Best Score, Best Actor, and Best Director. That's an achievement in itself right there, especially a low-budget, independent scene. I always tip my hat off to directors who could accomplish so much with little finances, which of course this film will definitely fall into that category. Any short film, independent film, does have that restraint of how can I make this film on such a small budget?
Yeah, and as I'm sitting here reading through the stuff about this, I enjoy history quite a bit, and this is a 1,300-year-old story that it's based off of, the Battle of I'm just going to try and pronounce it, the Battle of Covadonga, and it's interesting. It's an Irish filmmaker. It's a Gothic Irish folk horror, and it seems to have some Spanish roots from reading up on it a little more, because of the battle itself being one that took place in Spain from reading it. I'm actually going to have to look that up when we get done and read up on that.
Right? I always find that that's cool when we catch a horror film that we don't only watch it for entertainment, and it really grinds my gears when I hear fellow journalists that admit, yeah, I just watched the film to watch the film. I review the film. I just review the film. What about the psychological aspect of the film, or the antagonist, the protagonist, and in this case, the story? Analyze that. The guy, he just made the film. What are you talking about? And in this case, you and I, we both agree. This is a story. We could Google some information about it and get some more insight on why the director made this film.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm actually, as we're sitting here talking about this, I'm pulling it up, and I mean, we're talking about early on, 600-700s after the fall of Rome, which I love that early Dark Age period. I grew up with a lot of Roman history and Greek history in my life, and this period after the fall of civilization, as it were, just always fascinates me for the stories that come out. And yeah, this is definitely one about, not only two peoples, but two very different ideologies clashing in this region. You know, the early Christians and early Muslims that came together in Spain and Portugal and that region of southwestern Europe after the fall of Rome. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see what kind of horror and setting that this brings about.
Interesting. To close out this segment, Covadonga is available for purchase or rental on their official website, covadonga.com, alongside songs, videos, and other stuff that they're included on their website. You could also receive the soundtrack when you buy the film, which is great because it provides the best of both worlds. Horror film and the soundtrack accompaniment to horror films are just as important.
Yeah, I mean, music can make a movie. I've seen plenty that the story might not have been great, but I'll come back and watch it again just to hear the emotion in the scenes from the soundtrack that's laid out on it.
It's so true.
Daughter of Dismay production complete.
We had reported that Daughter of Dismay was in production. This is the latest film from filmmaker James Quinn. If you're unaware with Quinn's filmography, he has the ability to infuse either through his knowledge or through research on Satanism, satanic visuals, surrealism, avant-garde feel to his films. It's very he thinks outside the box when he composes these horror films, and they're so surreal that it invokes different interpretations on a psychological level, and I that's one thing that I appreciate with horror films. Daughters of Dismay is unique because it's filmed with an interesting camera work. It's 70 millimeter and 35 millimeter print. In a digital age where everybody's shifting over to cell phones and red cameras, utilizing this type of gear in itself really not only provides a vintage look, but also enhances that surreal feel to the whole story. Dan, are you familiar with James Quinn's work and or Daughter of Dismay?
I am not, but I've been sitting here reading this, and I mean, first of all, just the idea. I mean, I love that there are still people out here that use film stock to make these movies. You know, sometimes digital high definition, you know, it's great for what it is, but sometimes you want that grainy feel. Sometimes you want to see the occasional pop on the screen. You want that kind of just, I don't want to say nostalgia, but, you know, an actual film on film is so much different in a digital age than just seeing a movie without it. And that they're going to do this on IMAX is impressive as well.
Mr. Quinn really thought, as I mentioned, he is thinking outside the box, and he pulled no punches from his latest film because he hired Ben Zirab as the DOP, which means director of photography for this film. He also added Joseph Birshaw. He's the musical provided the musical composition for films such as the Insidious series and The Conjuring, and also Justin Chenick, who worked on special effects for the TV series The Exorcist.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that roster alone, it makes me want to really see this film. I'm familiar with Quinn's work. As I had mentioned, he does infuse that satanic. I wouldn't say satanic. That's putting it too harsh, but it's just that dark, raw feel, that supernatural element, and there are symbolisms and hidden messages ingrained in the film, which for the casual viewer may not catch it, but for me, I personally like it because I can catch up on it and say, I'll make a note of it, watch the film a second time and say, what did he mean by putting an empty bird cage in a bedroom? What does that mean? So all these intricate things that just makes you watch the film, but really watch the film.
Yeah, and it really, from this description, it sounds like it's going to be very visually stunning, which, again, personally, I'm big on story. I can deal with low budget. I can deal with, low production values, even some less than artistic shots. I've liked plenty of movies that people would consider crap, but I've found them riveting for the story. Likewise, I've found some that have just lacked any story whatsoever, but they're just so visually stunning. I come back to them again and again just for the sensation that it brings. And this sounds, from reading, what's included here in the plot, and of course, seeing these credentials for people that are going to be doing the music and the effects and the photography. I mean, this sounds like it might just have it all, plus that added benefit of the huge IMAX screen.
Yeah. His films were small screen, directed for that distribution platform. To see this film on IMAX, that's going to be interesting in itself. Yeah. And also, we mentioned the plot, and here's the plot for Daughter of Dismay. It tells the surreal and mystical tale of an emotionally broken witch. She enters the darkness of the woods to fulfill her biggest desires, for which she taken extreme and radical measures that would have sinister consequences. Portrayed in elegant painting-like, the film is an epic, moving, and emotional trip through a world of witchcraft and occultism, leading to a heartbreaking and melancholic finale. That's the word I was looking for, occultism.
Yeah, and again, with and I love seeing them add witchcraft in there, because witchcraft has taken on so many connotations and so many just very. You say witch in a room of 10 people, and you're going to have 10 different perceptions of what it is, ranging from the old green-skinned woman in, The Wizard of Oz to Harry Potter and Friends. and it's just, genuine. If it's and you've said through experience and through heavy research that he does these very, very engaging stories. So I'm looking forward to definitely seeing his take on this occult sort of tale, this occult, almost with the way it reads like perhaps some sort of horror fantasy that we're gonna get to see here.
Right. I can't wait to watch this film, and this follows up to our initial coverage of this film when it first was announced that was going into production. I guess we have to wait till 2019. That's when Daughter of Dismay will begin its premiere on the film festival circuit.
Yeah, which, I mean, granted, we're starting November now. It's just around the corner.
Isn't that something? Wow. After Halloween, guess what pops up on the TV? Everything that has to do with Christmas.
It's time to break out all those Christmas classics, Gremlins, Die Hard, Deep Red, The Hatchet Murders. No, wait, I'm sorry, that's not a Christmas movie. I'm sorry. Bruce Willis made it very clear that Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. No, it's it's just it's that time, but definitely. And I like something else that we're seeing. And I'm sure you've paid attention to this as well. We've definitely got a theme going with all of these different topics, and it's women in horror. It's very much women driving, whether they're in the director's seat or simply the story itself, because witchcraft and the occult, this is in one of those things. Any woman throughout history that you see accused of witchcraft, occult leanings, devil worship, it's genuinely almost always a case of a woman who simply refused to conform to the standards of the society. It's never actually anything more sinister than simply being a free spirit, simply being your own person, and being restricted. The horror comes from, society trying to snuff out that individuality.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and that it still resides on certain cultures, that women are suppressed in that way. And if they don't conform to those cultures and those guidelines, they are killed or stoned to death, and whatever else torture that falls before that ultimate painful death. It's a sad state of affairs. Hopefully it would change.
Well, and it didn't happen overnight, and we're not going to get through it overnight, but hopefully seeing women begin to take control and have a bigger role in film, whether it's stories that center on the experience of a woman in some way, to stories that are being driven and created by women. Hopefully the change is going to have to come subtly and with time. And these films and filmmakers are definitely at the forefront of making it happen.
Exclusive interview, Dan Lee, founder Dano of the Dead blog.
Before I begin our exclusive interview with Dan Lee, founder of Dano of the Dead blog, huge thank you for taking the time to being our special guest co-host for this second hour of our 100th podcast episode.
Well, thank you for having me. I love getting on here and talking, especially when it's talking about horror.
Horror is a great topic. There's so many avenues that we could delve into, but you're going to be the center of attention. And to kick off our interview is the origin story, a little bit about yourself, your career, and what got you started in covering the entertainment front for the horror genre.
Primarily, I write a lot of horror fiction, short fiction, and my wife convinced me to start getting on Instagram to advertise some of my stories. And I started meeting people and getting affiliated when they were putting out calls for writers. So I think the first place I worked for was Psycho Drive-In. I say worked for, like I don't still write for them. The first place I started writing for was Psycho Drive-In back in 2016, and started doing a regular just review column called Beautiful Creatures about just old B horror movie monsters. From there, I answered a call and got on with 52 Weeks of Horror, and I've been writing for both now for well over 2 years, or right about 2 years. Time's a mystery at this point. But yeah, it kind of snowballed after that. I got a chance to continue exploring my fiction while getting introduced to these incredible new avenues of horror. Especially after 52 weeks, I started getting more of an introduction into independent horror, which, you know, for a guy that was going from old B horror movies to independent horror, it was nice because I was skipping out on the stagnation that was hitting Hollywood with the genre.
Right. And in your case, being a freelance writer comes with its own challenges. Our first interviewee for this podcast, she creates original content, and I relayed the question. There's always that sense of difficulty, those obstacles when it comes to paying your bills, paying your rent, and also pursuing your dreams. And as a content creator, whether it be video or in your case, as a writer, a little bit about that area and the challenges that you face day to day and pursuing your dream as a writer and also paying the bills.
Yeah, well, and you know, the thing is, I spent the last 13 years almost working in a 911 center. I worked for a police and fire department, answering emergency calls, sending out responses, dealing with some pretty heavy stuff. And finally, you know, I talked to my wife and was like, look, this is not something I want to continue doing. And so we started budgeting and figuring out how to do it. And, you know, once you take that leap of faith there, that you're going to put everything into, you know, following your passion as a career. I mean, every day is legitimately a hustle. You're out there, you're chasing down stories. More importantly, you're chasing down places that'll pay you to write for them. And, you know, content mills, websites, anybody that's willing to pay you $5-10 for an article here or there at 500 words. By the end of the day, if you're lucky, you might have written a couple of thousand words for $30 or $40, and you know, you got to get up the next morning and keep at it.
Right. And that right there is dedication. There is not much profit when it comes to doing freelance work or doing content, whether it be for YouTube or Instagram, but the passion eventually, and legacy is another thing that outweighs the monetary compensation that is only temporary. Sure, you get a good paycheck, but the legacy that you're building for yourself in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, or when your kids are older, they say, wow, this is what my father or my grandfather accomplished during his time. Look what he did.
Yeah. Well, and you know, we're sitting here doing this interview. My grandfather was a carpenter, and you know, my parents still live in the house that he built over 50 years ago. I'm sitting here doing this interview at a desk that he built, you know, 15 years ago for me, that, you know, 30 years from now, I'm going to give to my son. And it's one of those things you got to think about. What are you creating right now? What is it that you want to hand over to that next generation? And what are you hoping to convey with it? You know, do you want to, if you're going after the viral fame, you know, it's not going to be anything solid. It's not going to be anything that's going to last. But if you take the time, you cultivate your art and your passion, and you work at it, you build something solid and expand upon it, so that 20, 30 years from now, you can look back and say, I'm proud of what I've done. I mean, I've been broke. I'll be broke again. And what money can't do for you is it can't give you the satisfaction that you followed a calling in your soul.
Right. That is so true. And that is a problem that I see, especially with content creators, their parents, let's say, for example, say, hey, you're not going to make money on YouTube. You're not going to make money doing videos for Facebook. We're not talking about the comical videos of the cat, kitten. No, we're talking about someone who dedicates their time, a review or something educational. And go to college, the parents would say, or take up a job, go to the 9 to 5. And that in a way really depresses the person because they want to pursue something creative. But of course, the facts of life, you would need a job to pay for whatever it is that you need to pay for.
Yeah, I mean, you still got to eat. You still got to keep a roof over your head. But the thing I learned is when I first started with my writing, I was a 17-year-old kid that just liked making weird stories. And by the time I was 27, I was working 12-hour days in a 911 center. I was moonlighting at night as a security guard. And in the summer, I was picking up jobs, doing handiwork and cutting yards. And I spent so much time and energy trying to make money. And as soon as I said to myself, I don't want money, I want stories, I want experience, I want my life, things improved dramatically. I'm still finding ways to pay the bills, but there's a issue of quality of life that anybody that creates has to look at. And if your focus is on the money, then get you a 9 to 5, do the whole 40-hour work week, get out there and make some cash. But if you want to create art, think about not what you're dealing with now, but what you're going to create down the line, because your life will improve dramatically once you say, I want to be a creator instead of a consumer.
Right. And with the power of social media at our disposal, there is no excuse whatsoever. And also to heighten that, our mobile devices are so advanced in technology. I just have to elaborate. These devices, every year they improve. And I just saw a commercial the other day for the new LG. I'm like, what the hell is this? The new Pixel. I'm like, whoa. Mm-hmm. I got to pick up forget about getting a Red. I'll pick up only 2-3 of these guys and, you can start making some quality films with those things.
Yeah, I mean, I've got myself, one of the first investments I made when I started getting serious about the journalism is I wanted to make sure that with the stories I was writing, I was providing pictures. I wanted to be full service for whoever I wrote for. So I went out and I picked me up a used Canon T6. And it takes some really great pictures. But then I pick up my smartphone, and I've got an old Motorola smartphone, and it's got the little option for attachments here. And I put on the attachment for a camera, and it takes pictures every bit as good as my Canon does. And I can upload those instantly now to social media, and I can do editing and everything right there. I can do podcasting from here. I can write my stories from here. And I mean, there's no limit to what you can do now as a creator, literally carrying your entire studio in your pocket if you want. And
we're living in great times right now. We did not see anything like this not even 10 years ago, I would say. I would say 10 years ago is when things started to get advanced in terms of video and audio and pictures. The pixels on these mobile devices. Just goes to show you, there is no excuse. If you want to create content, if you want to be a writer or anything, there's a lot of free stuff online to acquire, and the gadgets are low cost. It's just a matter of putting the effort into it.
Yeah, it really is. It is a matter of taking the time to say, what is it? What story do I want to tell? What image do I want to capture? What sound do I want to capture? And then how do I want to share it when I'm done? That's it. And I mean, it's really limitless. And, you know, we were talking earlier with the 15-second horror film challenge. And there is so much going on now in film, and this whole digital revolution that we're still in the midst of is changing how we look at films. I mean, streaming services. 10 years ago, there was no streaming. There, you know, I still remember signing up for Netflix when I got 2 DVDs at a time and thought I was hot shit because, hey, now I get to watch like a quarter of a season of House, you know, before I send it back and get another part of the season in 2 weeks.
Right.
And now I can literally download everything onto my phone and watch it when I want. The way we, you know, consume entertainment is changing the way we watch movies, changing the way we read books, changing the way we listen to music. And honestly, if you're out there and you're an independent artist and you're creating, you have the chance right now to jump on board before the industry ever attempts it. Because big studios, big publishers, you know, big producers, they don't care about the independent scene. They don't care about what's happening in independent film. They don't care about indie press or indie music, but fans do. And you can get out there and create your own everything and get it to your fans and build a better fan base than any major production studio is going to have, because they don't want to, they just don't want to get with the times.
Interesting point indeed. And that brings us over to the horror front. Covering the horror genre and having their knowledge of the horror genre at hand, what changes have you seen, let's say from the 70s up to now? And most importantly, what areas do you want to see in mainstream horror that need changing like right away?
For starters, we've got to get out of this cycle of the big studios regurgitating old ideas. You know, I've heard great things about Halloween that came out just a couple of weeks ago, and you know, that's fine. I'm glad fans are excited. I'm glad they've got something that they really enjoy. Something I'm not going to call it new in the franchise, because it's really not. It's the same idea. It's still Laurie Strode 40 years later trying to outwit and escape her psychotic brother, who now in his late 60s is still on a mass murder spree. And I just, you know, it's great if you're a fan of the Halloween franchise. I'm happy because you've got something new to look forward to and enjoy. But, you know, the studios have got to quit dredging up the old ideas, because they're not doing them in a way that actually pays tribute to or forwards the story. It's, you know, the Jurassic Park films are a great example of it. Both Jurassic Worlds have been pandering to nostalgia and, you know, just a consumerist base. I mean, you walk into the Target or the Walmart and you see all the Jurassic Park toys up on display, and they've literally just slapped a paint job on the stuff that was left over from 1994 that they didn't sell the first time. And I think that's the biggest thing I want to see change with the big studios, but honestly, I'm a realist. It's not going to happen because the big studios and the big producers and the big names are interested more, it feels like, in making money than in making art and making good stories. But, on the other hand, the independent circle, in the 70s and 80s, this is stuff that literally you would have had to have gone to a porno theater and caught a double feature of Debbie Does Dallas and, Deep Red, the Hatchet Murders. You'd have had to have caught some sort of, you'd have had to have gone out into these seedy, just dangerous kind of places and places with these poor reputations in order to enjoy something truly unique and different. And with the streaming and with online platforms like Twitch and Instagram and YouTube, you can literally create anything and get it out there to the people without having to go through that buffer of big industry.
That is an inch, and you making a note of that grindhouse era of going to these seedy places. I remember those moments. I imagine I was about 7, 8 years old going to these theaters. I was literally snuck into these theaters just to catch horror films. And I'll walk out traumatized, like, oh my gosh, I just saw porn and a horror film in the same day.
Yeah. And I mean, you had to be creative if you wanted to see this stuff, if you wanted to, if you wanted to get a good horror movie when you were a kid. For me, I grew up a little bit later on, you go to the video store and you slip Snow White out of the case and you put the Evil Dead in and you take it up there and you hope the clerk doesn't check to see what's in the box.
Right.
And it was a whole lot of the same thing. You're sneaking these great titles that would otherwise be completely taboo and off limits. And you're sneaking a peek at something that's phenomenal, that changes you. And, I feel like it's a double-edged sword because all of this stuff is so readily available now, and it's great because you don't have to go through that filter. At the same time, it takes a little bit of the thrill out of it to me to think, yeah, okay, I don't have to, buy a ticket for Rugrats in order to sneak in and see The Hills Have Eyes. It's and it's just it's the way culture has changed along with the technology.
Yes. And that's what I say. The younger generation now have no idea what you and I have went through and the shift in horror film and horror cinema. They would consider something like, I don't know, The Conjuring. Not to say The Conjuring is not horror, but just using it as an example. I say The Conjuring. Oh my gosh, that's so scary. Yet we will say, really? But what about I Spit on Your Grave or some other film that at its time was something considered to be exploitation and taboo?
Yeah. And, I actually, thanks to PDI Psycho Drive-In, a few months ago, they started releasing a bunch of old blaxploitation films like Blackula, Blackenstein, Dolomite, things like that started hitting Blu-ray for the first time. And I had a chance to sit down and watch Blackenstein and do a review of it.
Right.
And, it's these old exploitation films that really paved the way for some of the modern horror and entertainment that we've got now, when they took these, you'd never see anybody genuinely remake Blackula in 2018.
Right.
It just, and arguably that's not a bad thing. I
Right.
mean, it's one of those things. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it was a sign of the times. It was, in part, it was defiance, because for a lot of people in that generation, this is the first time that they saw somebody of color or saw somebody of the opposite sex in a leading position in a film, and in a position of power within a film and within the story. They weren't victims, they weren't bad guys, they weren't, they weren't just background fodder. They were actually driving the story. And it's part of that legacy of film that only really comes from that horror and exploitation genre and generation right there.
Absolutely. That's so true. And that also brings upon it doesn't have to do with horror, but it has to do with what you just mentioned about African American, a person of color, being in a lead. And I find this argument to be it doesn't make any sense. They trying to plan the new James Bond lead, and they have Idris Elba as a contender to take over that role. And I say, wait, that sounds great. Hey, why haven't we had an African American in that? He's British. He has the accent. He has the bravado. Why couldn't he? But yet you have audiences or critics saying, nah, but James Bond who said James Bond is Caucasian? Or, come on, get with the times already.
And that character, and for years, I've actually had this debate with my dad. My dad has seen every James Bond movie a dozen times, because, these started with his generation. And even he's like, he would be great, because James Bond is not a person. He is a character.
Right.
He is an identity taken on by a host of different spies throughout the ages in these films. It's not the same James Bond in Octopussy that's in Goldeneye. These are literally different men that have assumed this identity over the ages and added to that legacy.
Right. And that filters into horror in so many ways, especially on the independent scene. I'm glad that we see the shift in diversity, not only in the cast, but also as the antagonist, as the protagonist. And I see good things. I just hope that Hollywood really takes an eye and show these filmmakers some spotlight that they deserve, and give them some contracts. And that way audiences on the general scale will say, oh, I never knew that, or I never seen something like this before.
Yeah. And, I think that if you could get just your average horror audience to sit down and watch some of the feature films that were in the features block at Women in Horror, that were in the features block at Nightmares, if you could get them to see what independent filmmakers are actively creating right now outside of the sphere of Hollywood, that you would see a huge shift in the genre. But, it goes back to something I've said several times. Film festival is a dirty word. It is a horrible, dirty word, because it always sparks, at least in most, people outside of it, this image of these very stodgy, elitist, closed off affairs that, you're just not welcome in. And so you never think of, good films for the average viewer coming from a film festival until you actually get in and you see what it's all about.
Right. And that always, that applies to the casual viewer who they want to see big budget films, and they consider film festivals to be a place for low budget, actors or low budget filmmakers just starting out and the quality is subpar. That is far from the case. And from what we've seen at the Women in Horror Film Festival is mind-blowing after mind-blowing film, one after another. And not only that, even the script reading a panel, the films that are not made, they're just ideas on paper. Wow, amazing. I look forward to watching something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, and I was one of these people at one point. I was one of these people that was like, oh, great, an independent film. This is going to be some sort of artistic Hollywood, insider thing, or it's a bunch of amateur filmmakers that are just getting themselves off on their own stuff. and in the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, my interpretation has completely flipped. I was not a huge fan of, going back to earlier talking about our fanboy moments. I really didn't appreciate a lot of stuff created by Aries-Scope, and I sat down a few years ago and watched Hatchet for the first time. Okay. And in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, I was a huge slasher fan. And I got bored with the genre and I fell out. And so I put in Hatchet and I was like, okay, this is Adam Green. I'm not going to get my hopes up. And it completely rekindled my love for the slasher genre. And I've sat here and I've watched all of this stuff that Aries-Scope has done. I listened to the Movie Crypt podcast quite a bit. And, it's a lot of the same thing. It is independent filmmakers that are putting together, the movies that they want, the movies that they love, and they're doing it for the sake of their love for the genre. And that's what's really missing right now from horror is we don't have enough people in the mainstream that have that same love for the genre as the independent crowd does. What we need are more, women in horror film festivals. We need more groups like Aries-Scope. We need more people like the Soska sisters who want to take something and remake it, not to cash in on your nostalgia, but because they want to take an old story that they loved and they want to share it with a brand new audience in a way that's going to connect to them the way the original connected to these filmmakers, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
So true. And to close out our interview, what is next for Dan Lee, Dano of the Dead, and also do add your social networking handles where persons listening can follow your work.
You just cut out completely on me.
To close out the interview, what is next for Dan Lee, Dano of the Dead blog, and also add your social media handles, URLs where listeners can follow your work?
Well, coming up, hopefully before the end of the year, PDI Press, the publishing arm for Psycho Drive-In, is going to be releasing Nyarlathotep 2, More Tales of Lovecraftian Crime. And what I've really been enjoying is working with this independent publisher. We've already released 2 volumes of short fiction, Nyarlathotep, which combined Lovecraftian cosmic horror with, black and white noir detective stories. And then American Carnage, which took post-apocalyptic dystopia and added kind of we'll say a modern American political flavor to it. And that's more of what you can expect there. Really, everything else is just a matter of, I've got a Patreon page. It's DOTD blog, same as my Twitter and Instagram, also DOTD blog. And you can find links to my website, danoofthedeadblog.wordpress.com. And yeah, I've got lots of links to stories, articles, anything you can imagine. If I've had to say it, or if it's come to mind, you can probably find it right there.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. And once again, for joining us as guest co-host for our 100th podcast episode.
Hey, I appreciate it. Let me know if you ever need another guest co-host. I'd be happy to come back.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, we usually have roundtable events. I got to keep you in mind for that one. And it's recorded. I'm going to include it in the audio, so I can't back out from my word now.
Segment 3. Trailer First Impressions. Sleigh bells.
It's Christmas Eve, and we're on our way to what might be the most exciting urban exploring adventure, and you never know what dirty things will come your way. I dare you to eat this.
Sleigh Bells, directed by Dan Walker, aka Spooky Dan Walker. The writers are Jessica Lernson and Dan Walker. The synopsis: while urban exploring in an abandoned museum park, 3 cosplaying girls accidentally unleash the vicious holiday beast known as Krampus. With the help of Santa Claus, can these girls stop Krampus from his killing spree? Now, we just watched the trailer for Sleigh Bells. Oh, wow. So many thoughts ran through my mind. And before I jump into that, Dan, what did you think of the trailer for Sleigh Bells?
It looks like it is going to be exactly what I love in a Christmas horror movie. It's going to be great creatures and so much blood, gore, and inappropriate holiday humor.
Yes, I got that vibe from watching the trailer. And another vibe that I got is, see, trailers are marketing products, and much like the cover, the poster art, they have to sway the audience to either watch the film or give it a pass. And some of the technical aspects I see in trailers are the creature designs, the cinematography, the acting. One area I was kind of iffy about was the acting, but on the flip side, I did enjoy the creature concept design. It looks good. I just feel they should have kept it a secret. If you reveal the creature in the trailer, then people already know what the creature looks like.
Yeah, there's that aspect of it, but from my point, I'd have to say, from my point of view as a fan of these creature features, it's kind of nice because you can see the horror comedy elements that are about to come from this monster. And it really really makes me want to spend some more time having a look at it on film, seeing it in action,
Right. And we all know what the Krampus creature looks like. There's no secret in that regard. The thing that really surprises me is Santa Claus battling Krampus. It's a clever ploy on good versus evil using these two icons.
Yeah, most definitely. And it looks like a lot of fun in a horror movie, which I mean that's the main reason I watch them, because they are just so much fun and so enjoyable to really sit there and get into something so bizarre and terrifying.
And the challenge for these type of films, horror/comedy, is that you have to present the best of both worlds. Earlier in our podcast, I was relating that idea that there's very few horror comedies that really set themselves apart, but there are those that attempt to do that and they fall short either in the horror aspect or the comedy aspect.
Right. They definitely do. And I can easily see this one from the trailer. I could easily see this one maybe going off the rails pretty early on, but looking at it again, I'm hopeful that this is going to be every bit as entertaining as the trailer looks.
Right. And this Sleigh Bells comes across as in my opinion, the typical B-movie horror comedy, but that doesn't say that the quality of the film is bad. It's just, of course, you have the acting aspect, the performance aspect, but you take it how it is presented, the comedic element, the horror element is supposed to be a spoof of some kind. I find this to be a popcorn film, that if that term is still used.
Yeah, I could easily see it being one of those popcorn films.
Heretics.
Because they won't need you after the sun rises. You need to be saved.
The last time anyone saw her was 2 a.m. this morning. Knock on doors, canvass the streets. Let's go find Gloria.
They believe that their Lord is inside of you. Tonight, they were to finish the ritual.
The next film on our trailer first impressions is titled The Heretics. The film is directed by Chad Archibald, co-written by Chad Archibald and Jamie LaForest. The synopsis: a young woman is abducted by a strange man who claims that a cult is hunting her. His goal is to protect her until sunrise, but while restrained, she falls deathly ill as her friends and family search for her. The source of her illness becomes more and more apparent. She's not sick, she's changing. The trailer for The Heretics is very compelling. It, in my opinion, doesn't give too much of the plot away. The viewer watching the trailer would say, okay, what is going on here? And eventually may want to watch the film to get the full gist, the plot, and everything that is happening to the protagonist in this film. Dan, what is your opinion on this trailer?
I'll be honest with you, watching it, just in the first few seconds, I was a little put off by it. Just something about it. But the longer I watched the trailer, the more into it I got, the more I don't even know where to begin. I mean, the visuals that they've shown in the trailer are very compelling. They very artistically shot. I love the reds and the blacks and the off-white of so much of it blended together. And of course, I'm a sucker for occult, demonic, whatever. And this is definitely piqued my interest.
And of course, once I seen that Chad Archibald was involved in the project, I knew there was going to be a certain cinematic projection given onto this film. As we all know, he was the producer on Bite, and he was also the producer on Antisocial 2. His IMDb filmography hosts a long list of credible horror films, and the plot for The Heretics, as you had mentioned, Dan, it takes that occult and those symbolisms and psychological undertones, and really conveys a good horror story.
Yeah, and the thing with especially occult and demonic horror is I've noticed in the last 10 years or so, there's always this tendency to lean on older classics, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, The Omen, and this one, it gives off, there's something about the trailer that I feel like it could be one of those, we're seeing something very supernatural, like very overtly supernatural, that could easily become something more psychological when you actually sit down and watch it.
Right. And that is a perfect mixture when you have a psychology and a supernatural, because you're, as a viewer, you're unaware, is the protagonist losing their mind, or is the protagonist really going through some supernatural trauma? When you put those two things together, psychology and supernatural, those films tend to really stand out from, let's say, a slasher. Of course, they're two opposite ends of the spectrum, but just making a little comparison there.
Yeah, I mean, it has that feel. It's almost, it almost reminds me in a way with the way the trailer is shot. It almost reminds me of that 2013 remake of The Evil Dead. It has that sort of, we're getting that overall sense of horror and dread, and the impression that we're going to see some really gruesome and terrifying things. And I mean, like, just the opening as he's walking her up to this cabin in the woods, and you see this strange occult looking stick figure that's been put up in the front yard with the human skull in the center of it. I mean, you're being promised something that is definitely out of the ordinary, definitely something that is going to make you uncomfortable. And I'm kind of interested to see how they balance out the occult and supernatural with the real world terrors of being abducted, being taken into some sort of religious order against your will. Right.
And it's interesting you bring up those parallels to the films you mentioned. According to the press release, Cabin in the Woods and Hereditary were films that paralleled this cinematic view of the heretics. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be arriving on VOD November 6th and DVD. Whoever buys VOD. Is DVD still popular? I'm not sure. But it's going to be on DVD January 5th.
I still collect DVD whenever I can, simply because you can't come back later on and edit my purchase with some different version of it. You know, what you see can't be edited down at a whim from the producers or from the releasing company or the streaming service. What you see is what you get.
Right. Yeah. I have 2 books, thick books filled with DVDs, and I said to myself, wow, now we have streaming. It seems so obsolete now.
It does. It really feels like that. But then, you know, you get on there and you're like, wait, was that in the original or not? And then, of course, you pull out your DVD and you're like, oh, hey, they did edit something out of here.
Yes.
So it's...
Yes. And
it's a comfort to have physical media. I mean, I've got my entire library on my Kindle, but I'm sitting in a room with 4 huge bookshelves in it right now, covered with paperbacks and hardbacks.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What a coincidence. My wife and I, we were just looking at our shelving. We said, do we have to get rid of some books? Do we really?
You know, my wife and I had the same conversation, and the answer that we came up with is we just need bigger shelves.
Right. Or bigger room.
Yes, a bigger room for it.
An Hour to Kill.
Meet Frankie and Gio, two hitmen on a mission.
We gotta handle this.
They are not just assassins. They are master storytellers.
You think you can handle it?
3 disturbing tales with everything you desire. Perverted farmers.
You're gonna squeal for me. You're gonna like it.
Voluptuous vixens.
This time tomorrow, we're gonna be the most in-demand bitches in the valley.
Glamorous mob bosses.
Damn it! He's gonna run away somewhere. We'll never find him.
An Hour to Kill. This film is directed by Aaron K. Carter. Aaron K. Carter serves as co-writer alongside Ronnie Jimenez. The synopsis: 2 assassins have an hour to kill, so to speak, before their next hit. To help them pass the time, they entertain themselves by sharing horror stories to one another with such bizarre titles such as Valkyrie's Bunker, Asakir, and Hog Hunters. Which hitman's story will be deemed most disturbing when all is said and done? Okay, here is another horror comedy. Not much on... Horror comedy is not really my cup of tea, but I would have to say that An Hour to Kill has the best of both worlds because it's an anthology and also has short films integrated within. And that, I love anthology films, so I set the comedy aspect to the side in this case. The cinematography, that's the issue that I had here. I would have to see the whole film to see really how the quality is, but from the trailer it seems basic. 2 camera shot, 2 camera, especially with conversations between the characters. The acting falls into the B movie realm. What's your opinion on An Hour to Kill, Dan?
Well, you know, I love horror comedy, and I'm truly a fan of B movies. You know, it's cinematography can be bad, and you can still have a good film if there's good story. I'm also, well, I'll cover this one next, but you know, it does look, like you said, kind of basic. You know, it's definitely got that B picture flavor, but being an anthology gives it the ability to have some truly unique and interesting stories told, and the idea of, you know, 2 hitmen kind of sitting around BSing for a few before they do their next job kind of brings me back to thinking about Pulp Fiction. You know, it's kind of that you know, Pulp Fiction-y kind of homage almost with the short films.
Right. I didn't look at it that way. See, that's what's good about having different opinions. Yeah, that you got a good point there. For An Hour to Kill, I was expecting when I first read the synopsis, I was expecting something. Watching the trailer, I was like, okay, all right, I could go with this. But I'm more interested to see what each story is about, as opposed to the 2 hitmen in the car telling the story. I'm interested to see how each story is produced, composed, and how everything, because in 90% of anthology films there has to be a core story to tie everything together.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see, you know, clearly we've got a good setup for tying them all together with the hitmen, and I'm interested to see, though, because it looks like we've got quite a range of bizarre stories that they're going to be telling, from just murder and mayhem to some truly bizarre and out there looking stories. I mean, it looked like one of them had something to do with zombies in it. And so it's definitely interesting to see that, and I'm kind of wondering how that'll play out in it.
Right. This is one of those films that is for me. I'm interested to see it, and in the same way, I'm like, oh, okay, should I just put it at the middle part or at the bottom part of my queue? But nevertheless, it's a well put together film. It has some interesting concepts, and it's an anthology film. I see anthology films are really taking off right now, and that seems to be where independent filmmakers are really gathering, so that way they could churn out short films in a full feature package.
Yeah, and again, I love a good anthology. The 80s was really big with anthology films. They did a Twilight Zone movie. They did Tales from the Dark Side. I mean, there were a lot of great anthologies that came out of that era. And we've really had some very good ones that have come out of the last 5 years or so. And this will be interesting to see if, the cinematography aside, if it lives up to that sort of legacy that's been created by these both independent and big budget anthologies over the years.
Hey, you're really hitting it out of the park with these different perspectives. See, I didn't see it that way either.
Yeah, I actually just introduced my son to the Twilight Zone anthology that they did in the early 80s recently. And, because it had one of my favorite stories, which was I always forget exactly what the number is in the title, but I think it's Terror at 20,000 Feet or Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. It's the classic, it's the Thing on the Wing story.
Yes.
That, it's a staple when you talk about the Twilight Zone. And, but you get these great stories and these great perspectives, and you get things that you wouldn't normally enjoy otherwise, because they're not feature-length concepts, they're not feature-length ideas, but when you tie them together in sort of that interconnected way, kind of like Trick or Treat.
Right.
Trick or Treat was a great one because it took these very different stories, these very, you've got a serial killer, you've got werewolves, you've got this murderous bus driver, and you tie all of them together in a way that's so subtle. And anthologies are so good about doing that, and hopefully An Hour to Kill will be that way as well.
Right. I see your point of view. Now that I can think about it, Tales from the Dark Side, which was one of my favorite anthology films. Of course, I was young at the time, so I would just peek through the crack of the door while my mom watches the show. But I do remember the show in its entirety. It used to freak me out. But yeah, seeing the parallel between An Hour to Kill and a nostalgic anthology series, there, it seems to be good. And it's a creative way. It's ingenuity, and just to create these short films.
Yeah, and I mean there are so many great ones out there too, and I mean, well, the Tales from the Dark Side series. I mean, it was it was done very much like a PBS after school special when you look at the cinematography and the effects and the quality of the acting and writing.
Right.
But the stories themselves were so good and so engaging. And some of the stories that are here in An Hour to Kill's trailer they look just that bizarre and interesting that I want to watch it.
Scarecrows.
This weekend is gonna be legendary.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
And I've got one more surprise before we hit Paradise Beach.
Right. Let's go.
It's weird.
What?
The bird. Aren't scarecrows supposed to scare off birds?
Obviously, this farmer doesn't know what scary means. Someone took the car?
The next trailer in our trailer first impressions is titled Scarecrows. This film is directed by Stuart Stone as Stu Stone, and he is also serving as co-writer along Adam Rodness. The synopsis for Scarecrow is: while on a hike to find a secret lagoon, a group of friends have no choice but to pass through an ominous cornfield. Unbeknownst to them, the farm owner despises trespassers and has vowed to kill anyone who crosses his land by turning them into living scarecrows, leaving them to rot in his field. Once one goes up, it never comes down. Scarecrows, then. I think they're an underappreciated form of antagonist in the horror genre. There have been countless films on scarecrows, but they just never got the recognition of a creature, a scary creature, like, let's say, I don't know, the Boogeyman, which also has a slate of films but has more popularity. With the trailer, what were your impressions on this film?
You know, it really does kind of pull to the fear you have. You know, I grew up in the South, and I grew up in some areas that were on the cusp between urban and rural. So it wasn't uncommon to find myself out at a friend's place that had a farm or had some land. And I mean, scarecrows are just freaky damn things. And they're even worse at night. Like, you're always sitting there looking and waiting for it to move. You know, some of them are just ridiculous looking and you don't think twice, but, you know, especially when someone takes the time to, like, make a burlap sack or put together some old clothes on what's essentially a cross and stick it out, you know, hanging feet above the, you know, eye level with whatever they've got growing out there. I mean, they have a weird sort of magic to them, I guess, that's just kind of haunting in a way.
Right, yeah. I've never seen a scarecrow up close, but it makes me wonder. Crows, these are the most intelligent species of bird. Intelligent, they're tactical, they protect their families, they could steal, they're easily trained. How do they get scared so easily with something hanging off of a cross? That defies my logic. These guys are supposed to be smart. They could see, hey, that's just a dummy. Let's just eat his corn.
Yeah, and you know, actually, from seeing the ones my grandfather would put up, they're really not. They're really not that scared of them. They actually usually tend to scare off more, you know, raccoons and small mammals. And, you know, growing up, I always saw them that had pie pans on for the face, and, you know, you might string some tin cans up along coming out from the arms. That way there's some noise attached to it. I never saw many that were this traditional, you know, burlap sack in on a cross thing. It was always more of a dressed figure with something to catch the light, which is what would normally scare them away because it looks like movement. But this also adds an extra element to it, because it's like that you know, you're sitting there, you're expecting it to move, you know, if it moves it's not going to be good. And what you want, what you hope is it's something supernatural, something you can outrun, or you can throw some sort of magic word at it to stop it. And what the trailer promises is something far more sinister and honestly more terrifying, in that person just waiting there, who's waiting out there in that field for trespassers to come so they can put up a new scarecrow. And I mean, that's the stuff that urban legends are made out of, and that horror films like this really count on, is that human element.
Right. That's what I did take from the film. As soon as I seen the title Scarecrows and read the synopsis, and here we go, another Scarecrow film. But seeing that the antagonist is not really the Scarecrow, and it's really a human, an outcast, someone with an angst against outsiders, I would say, okay, this is a different perspective of the whole Scarecrow subgenre of horror films.
Yeah. And it's funny you say it like that, because you never really think about there being a Scarecrow subgenre, but there really is. I mean, as far as creatures and thematic elements that terrify you in a movie goes, there really is with that. I'd never actually thought about that.
Right. Yeah. There's so many Scarecrow films. Yeah, they are. And as I said at the beginning of this segment for this film, this antagonist never got the recognition it deserved. It with so many films on it. I would say, hey, give the spotlight on this type of antagonist. I don't know why it's just on the back burner of so many horror fans' lists.
Yeah, and it's definitely one that's it's definitely a lot fresher of an idea than a lot of things that have been coming out in the last few years. It's got that creepy, almost from some of the scenes that are in the trailer, it looks like it goes from that urban legend terrifying haunt to almost a hostile style torture porn. And it's I would really be interested to see what sort of film this actually plays out to be in the end. Right.
The only downside that I see from the trailer is, well, not really from the trailer, is the plot itself, is the generic group of teenagers out in some remote area, and I'm sure somebody's cell phone doesn't work, and other cliches that are involved. Those are the aspects that really need to change in storyline.
Yeah.
But overall, yeah.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
Overall, the cinematic quality, I think it's above and beyond what I was expecting.
Yeah, and it is one. There's a lot of overused tropes in certain types of horror, especially things that end up, bordering on, slasher movie style. You've got the group of teenagers or 20-somethings that must be punished because they've gone where they don't belong. You've got the fear of the outside world, the fear of the killer, and I mean there looks like it's going to have some very standard issue, slasher movie points that it's going to hit. And what I'm hoping is that in watching it, there will actually be some elements that are fresh and original that will, even if they're just in some way with the development of the characters. I don't even care if there's a lot of overused tropes. If we see some genuinely new stuff with the characters themselves that are in it.
Right. And that all comes to how the director really changes everything to meet modern audiences. It's so true. Well, Scarecrows is going to arrive on VOD on the 11th of December 2018. Looking forward to this film. Looking forward to reviewing this film once we get our pause on this one. This looks interesting.
Bone Hill Road.
Closing out our trailer first impression segment is the trailer for Bone Hill Road. The film is directed and written by Todd Sheets. The synopsis for Bone Hill Road is: Emily and Eden Stevens escape one violent situation only to dive headfirst into another. Terrified and alone, they are stranded in the dark woods only to be chased in a horrific scene in a house of horrors. They must work together to get out alive. But what is worse? What is on the inside or out? The trailer for Bone Hill Road, once again, this is a creature feature, centers on a werewolf. Once again, werewolves has had its ups and downs in horror cinema. And I think many would agree or disagree, or agree to disagree, that the downfall for werewolves in horror cinema would have to be the Twilight films. I don't see big, oversized dogs as werewolves. No.
Vampires don't sparkle, and you can't saddle a werewolf and ride it into battle in Narnia. And I mean, oh wow, yeah. I think we can blame a lot of failure on certain types of creatures on Twilight, but Bone Hill Road, I'm interested in actually seeing how the story plays out, because it looks from the trailer like it starts off as your basic alone in the woods creature feature, and quickly descends into, battling some sort of psychopath in an enclosed environment, and then having the two unfortunately merge together for our characters. So, and I don't know, like, it's just so hard to tell from this trailer what to actually expect.
Right. Some trailers have the mistake of showing too much of the plot. Others show too little of the plot. Mm-hmm. And in this case, my opinion, there's so much going on in the plot. I'm curious to see what the film is about. But those two use of the two antagonists, talk about putting your protagonist in a dire situation. If they're going to execute something like that, I want to know more about Emily and Eden Stevens. Who are they? Why are they in this predicament? A little backstory about them, because if they die at the end, I want to have some remorse, some sympathy for them. Not just these characters are tossed at wonton and, oh, here they escape, or here they die. So what? That's crucial.
Yeah, and I mean, the characterization is really going to be the key with this, because you can already tell from the trailer the basic plot. It feels it feels in a way kind of like From Dusk Till Dawn. You have a story that starts out, it is very definitely one kind of story, and then it quickly changes and evolves into something completely different. And that's what I feel like we're gonna see here with Bone Hill Road, is that they've got two very different stories and they're trying to merge them together, and whether or not they'll actually succeed in pulling it off in the way that they're looking to, I feel like that's to be determined from what's in the trailer.
Right. I see some highlight points. Once again, I always bring the technical aspects into the trailer that I would for the film. The trailer it does show some good cinematic value with the camera work, the lighting, the acting. I'm kind of iffy about the acting. It does fall into the B-movie realm. I would like to see more emotional content, because this is a full-blown horror film and a thriller, not a comedy. So if we could get just a little bit more emotional content from the actresses, especially when they're in peril, when they see the creature attacking them somehow, I think that's an area that needs fixing. But overall, I'm interested. I want to see what Bone Hill Road is about. I want to know about these characters, though.
Yeah, I definitely want to see the story. Now, going back to earlier with Sleigh Bells, I think this is going to be one of those situations where less is more with the creature, and it's always like with a werewolf, especially, you can pull off a lot with a werewolf because so much of it has to do on a moonlit night. So much of the creature can be obscured in shadow and at a distance, but they have got a lot of close-ups on the creature in this trailer, and with the lighting that they've chosen, at least from the bits that are in the trailer, I'm not quite sure it's that the creature is going to have the same effect on film that maybe it did when they wrote the story.
Right. And again, I bring it up. Whoever edited, because for these trailers, they 50%, they're not edited by the director. He hires somebody, or the production team hires somebody to cut the trailer. Mm-hmm. And if you're showing the creature in the trailer, that's a huge risk, because we could go back to Alien. The first Alien, we don't see that creature at all until midway through the film, and even in the trailer, we don't see nothing at all, not even about the plot.
45 minutes.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, 45 minutes of character development and building tension, creating a scene, creating an environment, and then you get your first glimpse at the creature in Alien. And that's key with a creature feature, especially, is either have something that is just so incredible you can't take your eyes off of it, or have something so terrifying that you're afraid to finally get the reveal.
Right. Wow, 45 minutes is a long time. And we all know what a werewolf looks like, and it's not an oversized dog. Mm-hmm. To really pull off the creature, practical effects team have to be on point and have a perfect blend of beast and man. I don't think any other film has really pulled it off except American Werewolf in London. I'm still trying to wait for that next film to really come close to it.
Dog Soldiers did a pretty good job in, I think it was 2005, and honestly, I really enjoy the werewolf transformation that's in the Wolf Cop series.
I have yet to see that. I tell
you what, I love Wolf Cop because it is so shamelessly just cheesy and B-horror funny. It's great. It is a great horror comedy series, and it's got great characterization. It's got great creature effects. I'm very much interested. They give us a glimpse of the werewolf transformation in the trailer here for Bone Hill Road, and with the claws coming through the fingers, and again, it's very cool to get a glimpse of that werewolf transformation. but it also does give away some of the plot.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just coming, you know, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm just a film enthusiast. I enjoy watching these movies. I feel like I would have edited this trailer to either hint at the psychopath in the house or to hint at the threat of a werewolf or some creature lurking in the shadows. I don't know that necessarily I would have shown both in the same trailer.
I concur 100%. And to close off this segment, you mentioned that you're not a filmmaker. Surprisingly enough, I had that same thought process, and when I went to take film courses at the local community college, the professor he mentioned to the students that everyone sitting in the class is a filmmaker, and everybody's looking at him perplexed. How we don't know technical this or technical that. He says, well, have you been to the movies? Yeah. So you're a filmmaker, because you could tell what's a good shot, what's a bad shot, and what shot you would have wanted to see if you would have made the film. So I was like, whoa, that's a different perspective.
Yeah.
Very
Most
interesting.
Definitely. Most definitely. That is one way to think about it.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to our 100th milestone podcast episode. I would like to take the time to thank our special guest co-host, Jennifer Nangle, aka Queen Malvolia, who served as our guest co-host for the first hour of this segment, as well as Dan Lee, founder of Dano of the Dead blog. And also special thanks to our interviewee, Vanessa Inora Wright, co-founder for the Women in Horror Film Festival. My name is Ken Artuz, founder for DecayMag. We are not DK Magazine, DK, or the word DK. We are DecayMag. And you can find us across social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, at DecayMag, DecayMag. Do also follow us on your preferred podcast platform, whether it be iTunes, Google Music, Spotify, and please do leave a review on iTunes or Google Music. We greatly appreciate your support in that endeavor. We also have a Patreon campaign, Patreon.com/DecayMag. We just launched this Patreon campaign as a way to do a fundraiser. There's costs associated with hosting a podcast, hosting a news platform online, and we also like to expand on other endeavors and other mediums, whether it be print or videos, and we really need your help monetary wise as well as your support. So please do reach out as any way you can, whether it be through our Patreon campaign, reviews on iTunes or Google Music, or just visit our website. We have lots of content there to digest, lots of content on the horror, thriller, and sci-fi genre. Till next time.